and that's the name and
Oh, yeah.
so is Peter.
See, Rob's still there.
Thank you, everyone. Before we start the ordinary council meeting, we have a public forum session, and it's, the three speakers are in relation to the agenda item development application 2021.132 concept DA stage 1 on what is known as the Sexton and Green site. We welcome two speakers for the development application via Zoom, and one speaker against. So first of all, we will go to Rosie Sutcliffe, Senior Consultant with Urbis. Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks very much. I hope you can all hear me. Good morning, Mayor, councillors, council staff and members of the public. Thanks for that kind introduction. My name is Rosie Sutcliffe and I'm a Senior Planner at Urbis, speaking today in support of the application on behalf of the proponent, which is the redevelopment of the Sexton Green car dealership site on the corner of Rouse Street and Miles Street in the Tenterfield Town Centre. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this forum. Councillors and Mayor, we're very pleased that the assessment report you have before you has a recommendation for approval. My purpose here chiefly then is to provide you with a brief overview of the proposal and highlight its key benefits, and then answer any questions that you may have. I'll also be joined online by Peter Mills, the architect for the proposal of Mills Gorman Architects. Peter is also registered to speak this morning. I don't think he has a set piece prepared, more so available to answer any questions as I am about the proposal. So turning to the application, it is a concept approval. So essentially we're seeking consent for the site layout for this mixed use development and the contemporaneous approval for stage 1, which comprises a 4-screen cinema with cafe, car parking for 64 cars accessed from Crown Street to the rear, landscaping of the site and the creation of an access point through to the adjacent shopping centre. Stage 2 will be subject to a subsequent detailed DA, and this comprises a childcare centre, medical centre, pharmacy, bowling alley and cafe. So obviously the application that you have before you at the moment for approval is for the concept approval for that site layout and the stage 1. In terms of the architecture, the proposal has been designed to be sympathetic to its setting within the town centre, and the architect has been cognizant of the heritage conservation area in which the site is located and of the nearby heritage items. So it employs a simple gable roof form and is of a modest scale in keeping with its surrounds. As a result of feedback received from council during the assessment process from council's heritage advisor, the facade of the original Sexton Green car dealership has been retained, and this structure will be restored and integrated into the main cinema building. So this is preserving some historic fabric to the main street, which we think is a great outcome for the site. The proposal will result in a significant improvement to the streetscape due to the removal of what is currently a large area of open car parking, which doesn't add much to the interface with Rouse Street, with all parking to be consolidated to the rear. And then in respect of the uses, the purpose-built cinema is obviously a new offering for the town of Tenterfield, and we think this is an exciting development for the town. This is going to inject activity, vibrancy, and provide entertainment options for the population. And the future stages will provide additional services for the community. So overall, we obviously view this development as a very positive step for Tenterfield and something that represents renewal and reactivation of this key site on the main street and the further integration of this into the town centre. And I guess I'd also like to emphasise that the proponent for this application is the owner of the adjacent shopping centre. So I think it does demonstrate their considerable confidence and desire to invest in the town. So thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Rosie. We're running a bit short of time, actually, so we at the moment will move to Peter. So this Peter Mills, architect for Mills Gorman Architects. Thank you, Peter.
So it was, can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I was just saying, Peter was always going to be available online to answer any questions that the councillors may have, but I don't believe that he'd prepared anything specific to say,
No worries then.
unless he's there and wanted to do so.
All right, well, look, I will take one question only through the chair. Councillors.
Okay. What am I pressing wrong?
Rosie, there'll be one question. From
Okay.
Okay, good morning, Rosie. I just have, looking through the submissions that were put forward by the public and then reading your report, etc., I noticed there is no mention of the impact this will have on the band hall, which is a heritage site, and on the youth precinct, which has to be finalised by the end of December. Could you give me some updates on that?
I'm afraid I may have to defer that question to May Davidson. I'm not aware of, are these simultaneous projects that are going on within the town centre?
No, the band hall has been there for how long?
Are you referring to the School of the Arts building?
No, Rosie, it's a separate building, but look, we will defer that to May with the timing we have.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your input today and for Peter for standing by. I now call Sue Bailey. Sue, if you'd come forward. Sue is speaking. Sue is a community member and is speaking against the development application. Sue, likewise, you have 5 minutes and leave your warning at 1 minute to go.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Mayor and councillors. My name is Susan Bailey. I'm a third generation Tenterfield resident. Neither my husband nor I have any pecuniary or business interests in Tenterfield, and I am addressing this meeting as a concerned citizen. Thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting about the redevelopment of the Sexton Green site. I will be speaking against the proposal. My concerns stem firstly from the fact that the proposal includes a number of shops, 4 cinemas, a childcare centre and a bowling alley. Tenterfield currently has, as of yesterday, the 22nd of March 2022, 13 empty shops, many of which are large and could house multiple businesses. An example of this is Sellers. Another example is Ward's Garage, which is located at the corner of Rouse and Molesworth Streets. Some of these premises are also not well maintained and are a bit of an eyesore as you walk along. 3 shops which are occupied but not trading: the Singwa Chinese Cafe, Tenterfield Saddler and the Florist. And 3 businesses which are in transition: OP, Tenterfield Lash and Brow and the Royal Hotel. These premises are located within the Tenterfield CBD between Martin Street and Miles Street, north-south, and Logan Street, and behind the shops, east-west. The empty shops do not include the historically empty shops in High Street at Rivera's and next to the BP, but does include the renovated premises next to the Royal Hotel. Are Shanghang Proprietary Limited planning to offer peppercorn rents and leases to lure new or existing businesses to their complex? Then in 12 or so months, increase the lease rents. Customers will drop off as the novelty wears off. Businesses will find it difficult to pay the rent and eventually close, which would result in more empty shops in town. The Coles complex has struggled with occupancy at times since its development, including the recent closure of Target due to high rental prices. This has had a significant impact on the town. Is the council going to allow franchised fast food outlets to infiltrate the well-renowned and sought-after slow food culture which already exists in Tenterfield, just to have shops in the new complex occupied? These franchises will have a negative impact on existing and well-established businesses, many of which attract tourists to the town. Many of these people are repeat visitors because they enjoy what Tenterfield has to offer and our lifestyle. People are attracted to Tenterfield for boutique shopping and slow food cafes. Secondly, with the bypass being seen as a foregone conclusion, the number of people coming into town may be less, and therefore the need for more shops seems moot, particularly when we have seen several closures in the last 18 months to 2 years. Thirdly, taking into account points 1 and 2, this complex is likely to become a white elephant. Having 4 cinemas in a town of approximately 4,000 people is unsustainable. Our current cinema, run by council and volunteers, with movies and shows, only makes between $70,000 to $89,000 per annum. Council doesn't have to pay cinema staff as they are volunteers. There is no way 4 cinemas would make any more money when rent, lease, wages, hiring charges and ongoing running costs would be required to run them.
1 minute to go.
These cinemas would almost certainly run at a loss and would eventually close. And what would happen to the current cinema? Next, new development proposes a pharmacy. We already have 2 pharmacies, one of which is only part-time. Or does this proposal include the current pharmacy moving and vacating another large shop in town? Finally, Stanthorpe had a bowling alley. It had to close due to poor patronage, and their population is approximately 5,500. This development would be great in a town with a population of 25,000 plus. As a community, we need to be looking for ways to support our current locally owned and operated businesses and not introduce unsustainable competition to some already struggling businesses. We hope council and town planning will look at the long-term implications of this development for Tenterfield and not just the short-term benefits of redeveloping the area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll allow one time for one question of Sue if anyone has a question. Thank you very much, Sue. Right, we will now move on to the normal ordinary council meeting. Thank you, Rosie and Peter. That's the end of our community forum.
I'm going to skip the banner all the time.
Chris can come in. How did he get the link? He wasn't selected. Yes, because Sue.
Everyone, you'll just have to speak up a little bit because the mics aren't working to make sure everyone can hear. Welcome, everyone. Is this meeting still going to be recorded?
Yes.
Thank you. So this meeting will be
It's not working.
This meeting will be recorded for placement on council's website for the purposes of broadening knowledge and participation in council issues and demonstrating council's commitment to openness and accountability. All speakers must ensure their comments are relevant to the issue at hand and to refrain from making personal comments or criticisms or mentioning any private information. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. Now, as I said, the mics aren't working, so to speak up, make sure everyone's mobile phones are on silent, please. Opening prayer. We give thanks for the contribution by our pioneers, early settlers, and those who fought in the various wars for the fabric of the Tenterfield community we have today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we are meeting on today. I would also like to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging of the Juckaboo, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. We have no apologies. Any disclosures and declarations of interest?
Point of order, Madam Chair, to do with the
Yes,
disclosures of interest. In our agenda, we have a tabling of a petition with our newly, please respect me, but I'm just clearing this up and ask for advice. And have our newly elected councillor, Peter Murphy's name there. I'm just interested whether we need to declare them. And the other one is in a monthly operational report. Now consent and DAs, and this one's waiting for more information. It's DA 2021-158 with Councillor Junius Constable. Does she live with them? Advice?
Madam Mayor, can I make a comment?
Yes, certainly.
It's a moot point, Peter, because the work's already been done.
The work on the lane.
Yes.
How good's our council? Good petition, but
That's why I didn't make
Madam Mayor, it's just only clarity, because one thing we need to do is be on track with this stuff. Newly elected councillors need to know when they need to declare and stay in the meeting. But if your name's mentioned in the business paper, I'd have grave concerns that the community reads it and thinks, gee, Gina's getting a walk-up start here and they want more information. So either declare or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone to be aware, if you have something in the agenda papers with your name in it, you should fill out that declaration of interest form. And in this particular case, it would be, you fill that out as a non-pecuniary, non-significant thing and say whether you are staying in the room or not in the room. And then that will be recorded as we come to those things. Now with the DA.
Sorry, through the mayor, I also just should point out that Councillor Murphy did contact me yesterday and asked what the process was, and it was a slightly different matter. And I did inform him, look, at the end of the day, the rules are, if in doubt, get out, or at least declare and abstain. But he's new to council, but he did seek advice. So just in his, not his defence, but I mean, just to let you know,
in the meantime, we will have Councillor Murphy fill in
Yes.
a notice. Yeah, thank you. We'll get that done before we deal with that item, Peter.
Okay.
And also with the ordinary minutes.
My apologies, Madam Mayor.
No,
I absolutely accept your apologies.
it was just for clarity. That's all to
Yeah.
both councils I mentioned. That's all.
So just a point of order, I guess when it comes to the monthly operational plan, council's receiving and noting that, so it's just an update to information. So it would probably be a slightly different process for that because it doesn't actually action anything.
Yeah, but would it require a council declaring,
Well,
filling in that? Just
only once you go to, once it becomes an item. At the moment, it's just on the
outstanding.
yeah.
Waiting more information.
So staff officers will be processing those requests for those applications that are contained in the monthly operational report and extra information, so it doesn't compel council to any decision.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Peter.
apologise, man. I just
This
want
Peter
clarity.
will-
That's all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And meantime, Councillor Murphy will fill in a declaration of interest form for the petition.
Yeah, and then you need to accept that.
And
You need to vote. So when councillor Murphy's put that on, then we need to get that in the agenda then.
can we defer that one?
It would have been any of the information that was sent out to the business paper, a copy of the. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, we can just get to fill that out. That would be great.
Just a minute, a second. It doesn't.
Okay.
Just a minute, a second.
Okay, so I'll just call on a mover and a seconder to accept it.
Seems all right,
Wanna
Madam
move?
Moore, happy to
And
move.
thank you very much. Moved by councillor Petty, seconded by councillor Sawyer. And Peter will complete that as of now. Confirmation and of previous minutes, please.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move the confirmation of the minutes, but just for the question to do with something in there. That's all. On page 4.
Mover, councillor Petty, seconder.
I can't second. I'm
No,
moving.
you can't second. A second for seconded councillor Nye. Now, Peter, where's your?
On page 12, Madam Mayor, to the councillors, just to do with And it's, I could have raised it at the back of the agenda with the rescission motion, which I've got no problem with. But just for clarity, to do with the adoption of the minutes. Now, I've moved an amendment at the meeting on that day, seconded by Councillor Rhodes. Then the amendment, correct me if I'm wrong, becomes the resolution. I thought I'd moved that too, in respect, Councillor Sawyer, but I obviously didn't, you did. But I thought I did. We just went on and then the amendment became a resolution, which is exactly what it says there, but it's got Councillor Sawyer moving.
I think that's because Councillor Sawyer and Councillor Rhodes accepted your amendment and therefore it stays with that.
Right, good answer. Only for clarity. Obviously, that's how it went. Can you remember that?
I can't find the item
On page 12.
Page 12, it was to do
12.
with the Rotary and Oracle's distribution. So when you moved your amendment, that was accepted by the original movers and seconders, and therefore that then becomes the motion, even though you moved the amendment, it still stays with them.
All good.
Very good. So are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? No? So all in favour? Tabling of documents. Any documents, no documents retabled? Any urgent, late and supplementary items of business?
Madam Chair, whether it's the right place to do it, on page 78 of our agenda, it would be appropriate, correct me if I'm wrong, to do it here, to move item GOV 35,
Would be,
22 forward now, or?
yes, Councillor, our Deputy Mayor also raised that issue. So if you wish to move that,
Oh,
then John.
if the deputy wants to move it, I'll second it.
I'm happy to second it, Peter. Yep, no worries.
Just move that forward so he's all cut and dried and he's in.
Oh, well, he actually is in. It's just
Oh,
that that's just
no.
this is to do with the oath of office by our new councillor, Peter Murphy. It's just that it's better to have it at the top. Thank you. We'll move forward to the recommendation for items to be considered in confidential section. If we could have a mover and seconder, we have one item to do with there, please. Councillor Bonner, I think it is moved and seconded by Councillor Sutton, that we will consider that item in the confidential section at the end of the ordinary meeting. Now we will move to page 78. Item GOV 3522. I need a mover and a seconder for this. I will take it. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Petty will be the same mover. and seconder. Thank you. And our officer.
That's me.
Yeah.
So basically, the purpose of the report is just to inform councillors of the requirements under section 233A of the New South Wales Local Government Act 1993, being that all councillors must take an oath of office or make an affirmation of office at or before the first meeting of the council after the councillor is elected. The recommendation is that Councillor Peter Murphy took an oath of office or made an affirmation of office prior to the meeting dated 23rd of March 2022 and signed the appropriate oath of office or affirmation of office form.
Thank you. All in favour? Carried. Now move to page 28, which is item COM 2/22, the Anzac Day emergency. Mover and a seconder. Mover, please. Deputy Mayor John Nish, seconder Councillor Peters, and that is also.
Madam Mayor, the purpose of the report is just to provide information for the council's consideration regarding the arrangement of Anzac Day and to appoint councillors to attend the various, or ask for volunteers to attend the various services. So the recommendation is that in accordance with Council Minute 208/04, council representative Anzac Day ceremonies throughout the Shire will lay a wreath or present a book as per the requirements of the local organisers. And two, that councillors be allocated to attend the Anzac Day services and events around the Shire as follows. So the Mayor will be attending, hopefully, a 10 dawn service and morning service. And I need councillors for the to be identified for Torrington, Lagoon, Urbanville, Jennings, Drake, Liston and Mingoola services.
So Torrington.
They'll go to Torrington there.
Lagoon and Urbanville.
Both Councillor, what's your name? Bonner and I will do Lagoon together, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
at 8. And then if I can jump ahead, I haven't, because obviously with the mayoral hat, which you'll be doing the dawn service here, I might do, if no one else would want to do it, take dawn service at Jennings, no, in the award, that's all right.
May I just continue on with that?
Yes.
I'll be doing the dawn service at Liston, the 8 o'clock
No,
at
it's not. It's 11
Legume,
o'clock.
and the 11 o'clock at Urbanville.
It's here somewhere.
I can pay by the hour.
Okay, and
So
for
you can have one beer at each.
Anzac, this is that with me.
I'll do Mingoola, assuming that's my community, that's where I grew up and family and friends there.
Councillor Murphy, would you also wanting to go to Mingoola?
Tom was suggesting I go to Jennings at 11 o'clock. That's the right time, 11. I think it is.
Yeah, Peter's also going.
I'll
to
do the
Jennings.
dawn,
Oh, you'll do dawn.
Dawn
Right,
service.
sorry, yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, they got dawn service, followed by the preliminary cemetery, then they got the 11:30 gig.
That's what I believe is
Yeah.
correct.
No, that's how
Yes,
it used
correct,
to go.
Well, I'll do the 11:30 then.
Right, okay.
So, right, okay.
Let's drag.
And we'll choose, of course, is councillor Mindy.
Tim doesn't want to do a drag, I will.
Thank you for your humour, councillor Mindy. Yes, John and I always do the Drake service, and there will have to be an apology this year. Thank you, John. So we're all set. So we've got councillor Peters at Torrington, councillor Petty and Bonner at Legume, councillor Tim at Urbanville, councillor Peter at the Dawn for Jennings, and councillor other Peter at the 11:30 or 11. Councillor John at Drake, councillor Tim at Liston, and Gianna at
Mingoola.
Mingoola. All done. Excellent. So all in favour? Carried. Page 31, item COM 3/22, Technical Public Library Review of Saturday morning operations. A mover, please.
Yeah, have you
And a seconder. Councillor Nish, do you want to
I was
second?
going to move an amendment.
Okay.
This is me.
A seconder, councillor Secon. And over to our council officer, Darryl.
Yes, so I'll be dealing with this one, Madam Mayor. So basically, as council's aware, we're looking at ways that we can save some dollars and get our budget back on track. And as I always say, if we look after the pennies, the towns look after themselves. In this case, we have found a saving, and we are recommending that council cease operations of the Technical Library on Saturdays. But I believe there is an amendment.
You can do that amendment now. then.
Certainly.
I was just going to add one more word after council, the word temporarily to cease operations of the Technical Library on Saturdays. So it gives us the option to, if there's demands there later on or things change,
Thank you.
we can then reopen it on a Saturday morning or late Saturday for that matter.
I seconded for that amendment. Councillor Bonner. I'll put the amendment to add the word temporarily. So it would read that council temporarily cease operations of the Technical Library on Saturdays. All in favour? Carried. So the amendment becomes the motion. Any discussion? No? So all in, I'll put the we've got to move on a second.
We've got two, and then we've got one thing, two for the amendment.
So we've got councillor Nish and councillor Bonner for the amendment, and the amendment was passed, so that becomes the motion. So all in favour? Carried. We have Peter's. Yes, we do. Thank you. So this is a submission of a petition for the forest ECO 1/22, submission of petition for forest lane repair and resurfacing. I require a mover, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. A seconder, councillor Secon. So I thought
I just need my glass. That's fine.
No, that's all right, councillor Knight.
And you've just
Councillor-
bought.
Be careful here.
Can I leave the meeting?
No.
No, it doesn't require, so, thank you. We note that councillor Murphy has put in a declaration of non-pecuniary, non-significant interest because he's a signatory to the petition and officers. Mr. Council. Welcome, Dave Council, our engineer.
Morning, councillors.
Okay.
Councillors, we've presented this report basically to present the petition to council for their information and notation. The other point is that we, even though some interim maintenance has been done, as with all our roads around the town and the shire, we patch them, keep them in some safe order. One of the key things here, we've also suggested that it be considered with the petition and the request as part of council's deliberation for the budgeting process for next year, for any works in the to improve the urban pavement and also resurfacing. So by resurfacing, we mean complete resealing and fixing up of the road. Again, it's only just for consideration, but a key point of the report I would like to point out is that in considering these laneways that we have in the town, there are over 5 kilometres of these laneways in Tenterfield itself, and this particular section is probably one of the better ones. There's a number of the other laneways that we're aware of that have similar drainage issues, that they don't drain as well as this because they're flatter, and many of them are unformed and don't even have the bitumen. But the other thing is too that we also have to remember there's a number of them in Urbanville, and in Urbanville, because of the steep terrain, it's not as accessible. These lanes are really historic accesses for utilities, night carts, that sort of thing. In Urbanville, some of them actually form the really only physical access to people's property to get a vehicle in. So that again is just only minor compared to our actual road network in the town. So it's just a consideration when we're considering our budgets that we have these issues across the shire in the back lanes as well as the main streets of the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for your swift repairs to improve the lane. Any questions to that?
I just want to commend the staff on the job they've done there. Obviously, Madam Mayor, it was a huge problem with pooling of water and that, and just want to tidy up. I've spoke to people up there over a number of years to do with it, so it's good to think it does.
Thank you. And I just also, we know across the whole network that roads are opening up everywhere, springs where there were never springs before, coming up under bitumen and all sorts of interesting developments. And our team have been really working overtime to try and get those assessments done. Fiona and Dave, thank you very much. Thank you, Dave. We move to item ENB4. We did vote. No, oh, sorry. All in favour of accepting the report? Carried. Item ENB4/22, page 42. This is the development application 2021.132 concept DA for what we know as the Sexton and Green site. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor McNish, seconder. Councillor Con, and we welcome our officer, our town planner, May Davison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, councillors. The report before you today is for a development application for a concept DA and a stage 1 development application. The report is presented to council for two reasons, based on council's policy in relation to the limit of delegated authority that staff have in dealing with development applications. Firstly, on the capital investment value of the development, it's over $500,000 as a commercial development. It's valued at 9.86 million, which means it needs to come to council for a decision. And in relation to there being 3 or more submissions for the proposal by way of objection. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Once the business paper was made public, the applicant had an opportunity to review those conditions. There are some minor administrative changes that would need to be made if council is of a mind to adopt the recommendation, purely referring to make reference to the staging of the development, which talks about relevant construction certificates and relevant occupation certificates. They're an administrative process in terms of how the development would proceed. I'm happy to take any questions.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
Could I ask a question, please? The same question I asked before to Rosie. There is nothing in here, in all the plans, there is nothing into the youth precinct, because my worry is this is a legacy. This is supposed to be our legacy to the town, and our legacy is for the young people. In none of this is there any mention of how this the water effect and everything else that's going to come off, and the traffic will influence the youth precinct.
Can I raise a point of order, please, Madam Mayor?
Councillor McNish speaking.
Who won?
You did.
I just dealing with section green development, not the youth precinct or the band hall at this stage.
But doesn't
Distinct and to the report.
But doesn't it influence the traffic and the well-being of our community? Because
I'll allow May to respond to why the band hall wasn't mentioned, but other heritage items in that same block were.
Thank you.
Within that same radius of, because it did include the School of Arts and the Catholic Church. And I don't believe the developer, though, is necessarily privy of future plans of council.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. As my understanding, and our infrastructure team is looking after the concept plans for the youth precinct, that's still just at concept stage at this point. So there is nothing for this proponent to assess against. If there was an approved development or a finalised plan on any adjoining land, they could then do that. But at this point in time, there is nothing that can be incorporated into their assessment. And as Councillor McNish mentioned, the development does relate particularly to this location, to this site. The band hall is a separate matter. It is relatively remote and relatively impacted by the existing Coles development there. So it really, in terms of an impact, whilst it hasn't been particularly mentioned in here, I don't feel as an officer that it is relevant in terms of the heritage components to be assessed as part of this development. So it hasn't been, and we didn't request that as part of our heritage assessment.
Thanks to me, Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to commend May and her team for supplying us with extensive reporting through the whole process so that we are fully informed. Certainly gives us information to rely on to make a decision, doesn't make the decision any easier. I'll start by saying I'm not anti-development, but I am anti-developments that don't fit. I share Sue Bailey's concerns in some areas, but unfortunately as councillors, we have an extensive list of check buttons that we have to tick off, that we have to comply with. I have major concerns with the way they're ordered, because I would have thought public interest would be at the top of the list rather than at the bottom of the list. I know we didn't come up with the list, but bureaucrats elsewhere draw up legislation for DA processing, and councils in the bush have to comply when they're nowhere near its chalk and cheese. So I'm going to skip all the lot and deal with the public interest. I will be voting against this recommendation. No offence to me, but I don't believe this particular development belongs in Tenterfield. I'm not allowed to talk about competition, but I will say good luck introducing 4 cinemas when we have a beautiful cinema here, and Sue and I have sat there one Sunday afternoon and watched a wonderful movie all on our own. If I'd have known we're going to be there on our own, I'd have taken a bottle of wine and a couple of glasses, we'd have gold class cinema without having to wait for this one. But anyway, moving along. The current site is next door is operated by the applicant for the DA. So that's basically what we can associate with. If they're going to maintain the new site in the same manner they're not maintaining the old site, we're in for more trouble, because if you walk through the current complex where Coles are located, there's cobwebs, bird droppings everywhere. The concrete has not seen a high pressure cleaner in the 6.5 years I've been here in Tenterville. I know we've had drought, but it hasn't been for 6.5 years. The site is a disgrace and an eyesore. So why should I vote to give them access to another site that they might not maintain? It's ill considered with no public survey undertaken. It must fit. This could be, as Sue Bailey indicated, that current businesses will move from where they are into the new Butte buildings. I'm an ex-resident of Armidale, and that is exactly what has happened. They are now left with 3 blocks in a row of their main street that have now got empty shops, and they've been empty for years, not months, years, because a developer has come into town. Some were local, but the others were out of town, built a new Butte arcade, and everybody went across and took the low rents to attract them to go there, leaving their former businesses empty. we do not need one more empty shop in this town. We want to fill the ones we've got. As far as fit's concerned, I came up with something that in the public interest, that you put it out in the public. I have not had one person say to me, I hope you're going to vote for this development. But by geez, I've had a couple of hundred say, I hope you're going to vote against it. I didn't tell them what my intentions were. I'm declaring it now. I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sawyer. To speaker against, speaker for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Sawyer. It's a development I think that Tenterfield doesn't need. We've got most of the other amenities that are already proposed.
Sorry, point of order, Tom, sorry. I asked for a speaker for. I asked for a speaker for.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you'll have to
Okay,
correct your
but
word.
I'm happy to speak for Madam Mayor, just for the sake of debate, and please respect my point of view, Greg. What always, and I support your comments to do, to May and your team, and to May, thanks for the detailed report. You put a lot of work into it, as we always make through it. It's a big development. Always is my concern, and I refer to page 62, and it's not as a threat or live in fear of us as a council. But us as a council should always be protective of this council for financial risk and litigation. It really concerns me that an applicant who is dissatisfied with council determination, whatever way it goes today, has avenues for appeal, and it would cost this council a lot of money. And it just concerns me. So there's plenty of things that I disagree with in this development, but I'm in agreeing with our staff member in supporting the approval of the application.
Councillor Petty, just to clarify, our job as councillors is to deal with our local environment plan, what is permissible in our local environment plan or development control plan, and that's the basis upon which Councillor Petty has made his comments. And I will double down that as well. We do have very clear items that are prohibited in our RU5 village and township zones. This is not one of them. I remind people this is currently an industrial site, and the reason it's come to council is because it's proposing to take it into a less industrial thing, as well as obviously the money involved. So now, Tom, Councillor Tom, you can now speak.
Apologies, Tom. I thought
that's
No,
right.
no, he was.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam.
He's now speaking.
Right. I agree with Councillor Sawyer. I think it's a development that Tenterfield doesn't need. I think if it was another motor dealership, I'd be very happy to support it. At one stage we had 3 motor dealerships. Now we have none, which I think is not a good look in the town. We've got to go out of town to buy a car. And anyway, I just think it's we have most of the amenities already in the town that the developer are proposing, and I just don't think it's suitable for Tenterfield. Thank you.
Councillor John.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I agree with Councillor Sawyer about the current state of the Coles complex. It is rather disgraceful. Like I said, a good gurney for half a day would do wonders down there, and also the road surface has been breaking up, the park surface is breaking up. But if we look at the existing buildings, after 3 months, they're starting to look really decrepit now with weeds growing up through the cement and so on. But even though I'm not totally in favour of the development, I don't see how we can vote against it, because they've crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. I don't want us to see it up in the environment court. So I really don't see that we've got the option to vote against it, knock it back.
Thank you, Councillor.
My question to May is just with regards to stage 2 DA. Is it a time or
No,
not relevant?
through Madam Mayor, no. So if the first stage is approved, there's no time limit for when stage 2 will need to be commenced. Once stage 2 is approved, they've got 5 years to act on it. And same with stage 1, you've got a 5-year time frame. Same for all developments, whether it's a house, a shed, or a shopping centre. Once that DA is issued, you have 5 years to commence work on that.
Councillor Tim.
But sorry, I just want to go on the record.
agreeing with both sides of this discussion.
No, you're not there.
Well, this is the thing, is that I totally agree with Greg's comments, and that's probably the way I'm leaning on this. However, I also agree with the council's position legally. So this is where I just want to go on record that I do think the application is flawed. I don't like some aspects about it. I think one, the childcare thing is too small. There's cafes, we have enough open. Well, we want open cafes for sure, but at the end of the day, we do have a lot of cafes. It's a commercial decision, obviously, for these developers to open these businesses and fail should they do. It's a commercial decision. There was one comment in one of the objections. I don't know how to identify them other than with the number 7B022FE1, whoever that is, where they mentioned that it just so happens that a McDonald's would sit very well in one of those failed sites. And obviously, as a council, I should speak personally, that would be a tragedy for Tenterfield should that ever go ahead. So for a business to come in there now, it's approved, and once we get to a point where we're desperate to get somebody in there to fill a shop, I would hope that we wouldn't get to a stage where we would approve under desperation for a fast food outlet such as McDonald's. So the way I'm going to vote, I still don't know. I am dead set agreeing with Tom on how good would a car dealership be in that site. That's not what's on the table. What's on the table now is what we've got. So I just want to go on record with those comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just mention,
Yes.
just on the car dealership thing, this is one I have to let council know. Car dealerships are things of the past. They've actually got a 10 to 15 year lifespan, and that's why they're getting out. Within 20 years, you won't be buying a car. You'll be buying a plan for an EV and all the rest of it. And it's now being fast tracked because of the situation with oil. And that's why there's no interest in car yards anymore. And they're basically on the way out, the same way as the fax machine. So I just raised that. I know one wants them, but it's never going to happen.
What are we going to do with this fax machine? Can I have it?
Councillor.
It's going to the Smithsonian Institute through the mayor. Sorry.
Councillor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
So once again to May, and I have never dealt with any DAs through council, so I may be asking a question that isn't correct at this time. But on Monday, right throughout the media, it was released that Tenterfield had not enough childcare spaces in Tenterfield, amongst a lot of other areas in the New England. And this part of the DA is the second part of the DA. Does council have any room to move and talk to these people about the fact that, you know, we're low on childcare places? And the other thing that I just would like to, in defence of what Greg said, as a member of the public who often uses the Coles car park area, another problem that is the toilets are always locked. It's a public set of toilets and they can't even open that. So I don't understand, you know, why they're putting this DA through if they can't even operate the facility that they're already owning.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. Through Madam Mayor, in relation to the childcare facilities, that's certainly something that council could talk to the developer about. I guess from my perspective, and as the professional officer assessing the DA, that's not really my role to do that. But certainly council has arms that can talk to the developer in relation to that need, and it may be that they're not aware of that fact. So the answer is yes, council can certainly talk to the developer in that regard. In relation to, sorry, your second question about the access to the toilets. Yeah. And that has been a matter, I believe that council's been raised on many occasions. They're not technically a public toilet. They are actually owned by the facility, and they have rights to lock them and allow access only to their customers or to their staff as well.
Bring down that road tonight.
Councillor Peter.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to May, can we vote against approval of this particular DA that asked the applicant to resubmit another DA which is acceptable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Murphy, you need to make a decision either way. So it needs to be either an approval or a refusal. So an approval subject to conditions or refused for certain reasons. You must have reasons. Should council want to approach the developer, that's up to council to make that decision to do that. But from a staff perspective, that's certainly not a practice that we would do. If that was the case, we would have probably negotiated that during the process. If, for example, the proposed development we felt as staff didn't fit in that location, we would negotiate during that process. We wouldn't get to the end of it and say, look, how about you do X, Y, Z? But again, that's
one point on that, councillor, was council staff and the council don't have the opportunity to pick and choose the developments that are submitted to us. We assess those developments that are made by those individual developers who are seeking our approval. So as I said, we accept anything if we have a development application for something that might be really, deemed not in the public interest. We still have a responsibility to assess that in accordance with council's planning documents. So that's, as I said, it might be something unpalatable, but we have to actually make that assessment, and we assess it, as I said, not so much on the community desire. And we've talked a lot about the public interest test, but whether or not it's permissible under our planning framework.
Understand. What I'm suggesting is, would it be possible for the councillors to vote against approval on the basis that it is not in the public interest, to leave it open to the applicant to come back with another development application?
Should council decide to make a decision to vote against the development, the applicant can choose whether or not they wish to proceed, I guess, we've talked a bit about that, with the actions to demonstrate where council has complied or not complied with its own planning instruments. If they want to have this particular development, or alternatively, they could come back with a different one, but we are not in a position as a council to compel them to do so.
Councillor John.
Thanks, Mrs. Mayor. Firstly, what Colleen just said, that we're voting on this recommendation. It's not our place to go and tell the developers what they should be doing there. It's on this application, and whether you're for it, yes, or against it, that's your business, but that's what we're voting on.
Thank you. So I'll have my say now. We've been around everyone.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Jeff.
Just the point of liability, and the planning instrument and the DA have been adequately vetted that they do meet planning requirements. I am, also very concerned about the liability. So if it did go to the Land and Environment Court, the liability that we would be smacked on the head and sent home with a big bill would be very likely.
Through Madam Mayor, in this instance, given that my recommendation is for approval, I could not represent council. So you have a cost for a planning consultant. You'll have legal fees should the applicant choose to take it to court. So I think you're probably looking, six-figure sum minimum, if it's taken to all the way.
And as we've spoken before, if there is a refusal of the application, there needs to be a clear statement by the council as to why we've refused that development. So I've talked a little bit about the public interest test. That's what we would then rely on, obviously, to support that decision-making process.
Business competition doesn't.
No, through the mayor, you can. The one area that you can't really make a judgment on is whether it's commercially viable or not. That's up to the actual developer. It's not up to anybody else. They're the ones investing the money. Having said that, what I can tell you, and I've been involved on the developer side when we do an economic analysis of an area, they look at a 20-year return in some of these decision-making processes. And we talked about Warwick yesterday and the distribution centres, and I was involved in that analysis 20 years ago. So my point being that, and I was just saying to the mayor yesterday, we have interest from industry who want to come here. So they may be looking at that. They know stuff sometimes that we don't know because they've done their economic analysis. We have industry coming here that could be 100, well, not coming here, that are very, look, there's a good chance they may come here. They're talking about 100 to 120 jobs plus families. So you're talking 250 people, and they may be looking at those sort of industries and have knowledge that goes, right, we do think a child mining centre will work, because right now we don't have any places. I know from my own staff that I struggle to have staff to come back from maternity leave because there's no places here. So I've got, half a dozen staff on long-term maternity leave simply because they cannot get a place at the childminding centre. So when you're looking at from a commercial perspective, I urge you to be cautious because that's not our core, and you don't know what background research they've done. And trust me, I've been at the other end. They do a lot of background and futures and what they call is future research, and they may know stuff that we don't know. Okay.
Madam Mayor, with respect, I know you want to have the final say. It's more a comment than anything.
Absolutely.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
This is a very serious matter.
Yeah,
so
no, of course.
as much
and
debate
with
as
respect, and thanks,
required.
Madam Mayor. Just to be supportive of officer in respect to May and our CEO's comments and Kylie's comments. No way in the world should any council ever be bullied or feel threatened if we don't make a decision about something. But I'll repeat myself. Financial risk and litigation is one thing that any council should never lead your council into that. And I'm not speaking as a former mayor, I'm just speaking as a councillor. It concerns me that if we don't approve this today, and I'm not trying to convince anyone, you have to have a damn good reason to tell these developers why we aren't approving it. Not because I just don't like it or we don't want a theatre or whatever. The work and effort that's gone into this, Madam Mayor and my former fellow councillors, is very detailed. Our staff who are in the position to bring this such report to us do a lot of work to this. It's not just a thing they throw together in 5 minutes. So it's just a comment, Madam Mayor.
Can I just ask through you to May, would traffic be something we could look at? Because in their report, they mention nothing about the youth precinct. That's why we're going back to the youth precinct.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt there, Joe. They probably don't even know about the youth precinct because at the moment it's we've announced that it's going to happen, but we have not gone through a tender process or construction or design, etc., etc. So the developer, it doesn't come into their application. I might just make my comments and I can make some closing things up. And before we go to you, Peter, can I just remind people very clearly, yes, we all had hoped there would be a new motor dealership there. And I know when I first heard that they were closing down, I said, you know, there's any chance we're going to get Black Toyota, and that's what the then owner said, there's no chance you will ever get another dealership on this site because of the issues that they themselves have gone through as the second longest holding dealership in Australia. There's a current rumour around town that council has knocked back Black Toyota. This is the only application that has come to council in relation to site. So whoever's making these rumours are, amongst multiple other rumours currently circulating town, I wish they would get their facts straight. We cannot as a council vote on what we would like to see in the premises, providing what they're proposing is legal. So, you know, there's all the talk about we need a bras and undies shop. And yes, and all the times people would go into Target and there might only be a couple of people there because other people are shopping online or going to Stanthorpe or here or there or the other. And it's now come back to bite. We cannot vote on what we would like to see. What I'm happy to see, though, in the proposal is that there are not a series of retail shops proposed there that might end up with our lovely shops in the Main Street closed there, other than a potential pharmacy, which may or not, you know, we already have a limit in town of 2 pharmacies, so no additional pharmacy can go there unless one of the existing ones chooses to move. We have had, I mean, you read all the objections and different stuff on the up the street and media saying we've got enough food outlets. We had at least, I think I count about 5 to 7 food outlets closed in the last 10 years, and some of them are very mixed, and it wasn't closed due to lack of income. There were other reasons, and it's pleasing that the Royal is short. It will open soon, and in September I think we will have our place reopened under another name. The youth, I know Councillor Sawyer said no one has said they want to see it happen. I've had quite a few people, particularly young people, who are going, we can't wait. But not having childcare, as Daryl has said, is inhibiting. We've got businesses really keen at the moment to build on the top of a hill, not on a floodplain. and people who would like to move to the top of a hill and not out of a floodplain. And that's one of the things that is impacting them, is the ability to access childcare. We also need to be aware of the message we are sending to other businesses from that said floodplain who are also looking to the top of the hill. If they consider that council is a, it's really interesting. We get accused all the time of stopping things, and our council staff have followed very rigorous protocol, and I see have added rigorous conditions at the start of the document. So as such, irrespective of what I personally would like to see in that precinct, I will be voting with the staff recommendation. I'm making that quite clear now for the very reasons that it has met our LEP, it has met these additional conditions that Tamay, our planner, has put on, and it certainly demonstrates some confidence in our local area. Now, Councillor.
Councillors, I personally believe that the development application is not in the best interest of the community, but I also believe it's not in the best interest of the community, in particular the ratepayers, that we take the risk that Peter has correctly referred to. I do not believe it's in the best interest of the community to send a message to future developers that you can do all of that work, spend all of that money, have the support of the council and get voted down by the councillors. Therefore, I will be reluctantly voting for the development application.
I believe that we put the report.
Before we, on page 5.
Sorry, Chair, it's a point of order. There's been a procedural motion to move that the motion be put.
In fairness, but I don't need to comment. I think there's been plenty, and you've done a good job of bringing back and forth. I think we need to put it together.
Just one order for new councillors, that all of your votes are recorded. This is a planning matter,
Yep.
so each of those will be recorded. So if you can just wait for 5 seconds as you give your votes, so that Liv captures that as well, please.
And that opposite recommendation be put as is.
Yeah.
So, okay, so do you have a closing comment, Councillor?
No, I think enough's been said.
Okay, so I'll put the motion. All in favour?
So,
Record the names.
Councillor Peters, Councillor Sakoni.
You want to say that loud, Madam Mayor, please?
Yes, so Councillor Murphy, Councillor Tom Peters, Councillor Giannis Klum, Councillor John Fish, Councillor Jeff Nye, Councillor me, Councillor Tim Bonner, Councillor Peter Petty, and Councillor Kim Rhodes, and against is Councillor Sawyer. Thank you. So the motion is.
We'll put a frowny face on next to yours if you like.
Thank you, everyone, and we really appreciate everyone's personal feelings, but also appreciate the action in voting in accordance with the conditions of our local environment plan. Councillor Kim.
So where we say approval to subject to conditions, are we able to add conditions?
The conditions that have been put forward will be the conditions that are imposed, with that slight amendment that Tamay talked about before to clearly articulate the staging of that development. So all the conditions are the same. It's just whether it belongs in stage 1 of the concept or stage 2.
Can I, Madam Mayor, and I apologise, and the deal's been done and we need to move on. Tree, Colin, what if I missed a slight amendment for what?
No, there was Tamay, can you read it out?
I apologise.
The question. So it's not the actual conditions, it's a procedural and administrative amendment, but we haven't identified clearly enough which stage it belongs to in the condition, so that we're happy with our interpretation.
Yeah.
But there was a request from the applicant to be quite clear on what was included in the first concept development that was approved and what was included in.
Oh, you're referring to stage 1 and 2.
That's correct.
Right.
Within, so there's no changes to any conditions or anything. It is purely an administrative highlighting, I guess, of whether or not it belongs in stage 1 or 2. We've called it like the application, and what the applicant has asked for is that we clearly identify whether that's within the concept 1 or 2.
Thank you. Thanks,
Sorry if I wasn't clear.
No. Just when you said this.
Thank you, Mate.
I missed something.
To the officer's recommendation from the council.
Apologise, Madam Mayor.
Our next item is page 64, but it's 10:30, so we will break for morning tea. Or reserve morning tea, everyone.
I moved it.
Thank you, and
Suspend standing orders.
thank you, sir. Councillor Peters moved, Councillor John seconded, suspend standing orders.
Sorry, Bruce, I was ready, Bruce.
What happened?
No, we're going to get rid of
We
this.
missed it.
Deliveries
We missed
first.
it. We actually missed
We
it.
Chair to deliveries first.
Traffic.
No, we haven't missed
No,
it.
we're going to.
Because we're suspended standing orders to go to morning tea, Bruce was behind you, rushing to the chair.
Motion.
Oh, I'm happy to do that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Secon, seconded. We move to item ENB 5/22. Technical Shire Council Economic Development Activation Stimulus Package. Mover and seconder, please. Sorry, Jeff, you had your hand up before, so I'll take you as a mover. And the seconder, Councillor Kim. And welcome our Bruce, our new economic development and special projects. Sorry, that's which as I will remind everyone is filling a vacancy, not a new position. Welcome, Bruce.
The recommendation before you, Councillor, is that the package cease operation 30 June. Background is it was introduced against very bad drought by bushfires when economic conditions were tough. Since then, seasonal conditions have improved. Moreover, land values have increased markedly. There's been big increases in property values for both houses and vacant blocks. The table on page 67 shows that blocks are now selling from roundly 80,000 to 150,000. It's probably reasonable to say that they have doubled in the past couple of years. So 2 years ago, the water and sewage contributions equated to roundly a half to a third of the asking price of vacant blocks. Now the water and sewage contribution equates to probably a quarter for small lots to less than a sixth for the larger blocks. In the past 2 years, there's been 20 residential blocks approved for subdivision. The report shows that the contributions foregone or the subsidy cost to council has been roundly 350,000. The report recommends it cease because the contributions are now well in line with market values. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Any questions, Bruce?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Before I more of a comment to do with a bit of history, deal with this, Madam Mayor. Bruce, welcome. It is an important position, and I wish you well in your endeavours and offer you my full support as a senior economic development officer. And I know that you bring a lot of skills to the tables with what we need. So I wish you well, mate.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, to do with this and fully support the ceasing this, but just in the last little while to do with this current council, it's only a comment, Madam Mayor. With I don't do social media, but the council don't listen, and we haven't done this or that. Go back to the former council, which a lot of us are still here. We listened to the community to bring this forward. I know you, Councillor Sawyer, I'm not picking you, you're heavily involved in and being supportive of this, and two former councillors, Barry and Rogan, I see you in the old business, mate. So we did listen and we did bring it in. We're doing exactly what we said we're going to do. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's in 2 years.
It was a 2 year initial period. And that's what we're saying.
To be supportive of development, and I just wanted to know that's all that we do, and we try our best to do the best we can with all this sort of stuff. So it was just a comment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions or further comments or queries? Councillor Sawyer.
I fully support the recommendation, particularly because the land values here are so much less than from where people are coming that they don't need that additional incentive. They're typically selling on the coast or in Brisbane, Sydney, and they get so much more for their properties. So an extra 20,000, so 11, 12,000 won't make the difference of whether they come or not. It will make a difference to council, as Bruce said. It looks like it's cost us $350,000.
Yes, that's correct. On page 66, that's what we've foregone with that. I mean, we could, some of the developments, just as explanation to new councillors, were very much from local people, and I think part of that came from, as you said, the economic situation at the time. So, any more comments? I'll put the motion. Right, those in favour? Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, well done. Thank you. Well, yes.
Welcome to. Now, we've already done the next item. So we now move to page 82. Oh, sorry. This is item GAB 28/22, monthly operational report for February. Move it, please.
Happy to move that way.
Peter, seconded, councillor John.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it's just the monthly operational report. As you know, we've got a new report. It's still a work in progress, but we're slowly fine tuning it. The recommendation is that council receives and notes the status of the monthly operational report for February 2022. Happy to take any questions.
Madam Mayor, through you, once again, a thank you and a general comment to do with operation report. Fiona, I did ask to do with the transport network grading and the schedules in there, so thank you very much. I know you're going to do a lot of effort to do that, and it's good to read, and our graders are out there and doing the best they can in the conditions that they've got to deal with. And the other is just a note too, Madam Mayor, to do with our sale yard numbers, to do with the outstanding yarding of the winter sale last Thursday, and it was acknowledged. 3,200 head out there, and a great day, and next Thursday another 1,000 odd head out there. So our rural area we are, the rural economy is still our biggest thing, and place followed by tourism. They're trying really hard to get the numbers up and be supportive of our sale yards, and I just want that noted. It was really good to see that.
We actually had more, I think Casino only had 1,000 at their sales, so that was.
Yeah,
So that was good. Councillor Swear.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. On the outstanding applications under the DAs.
Which page?
62.
Yep.
The Cracker Quarry and Ag Supplies Proprietary Limited. Information required from applicant, insufficient information provided in complete assessment. My understanding is that some activity has already started on that site. Would have thought the process we went through with these people on the Sandy Flat Road development there, all the trouble we had, I think council went above and beyond to help them with that application. They can't use the excuse this time that they weren't aware they needed the DA before they could start anything. I'd like to know where we're at. Are they commencing activities, or are they meeting the requirement and not doing any activities?
Can I just?
Yes.
No, the questions to start. But I was out there the other day doing a carving job, Madam Mayor, and I didn't see any activity on the site.
I haven't seen any driving past. I have been onto the site previously with the applicants when they first made their application. We went out. Anthony Danteith actually inspected that site. So I went with Anthony on that particular day. I haven't seen any evidence of activity with the exception of the removal of some items from that particular box. So there are things that have been removed from the site, and that's obviously not prohibited, but I haven't seen anything. I'm happy to take it on notice and follow it up again. And it probably
is an objector that has either lodged or will be lodging one and has contacted Tom and myself.
Yeah, happy as always.
There is activity in the fertiliser side, which should not happen. It's part of the DA, and they're well and truly aware during the last process they needed a DA and we had a fully fledged business, we were considering for DA. Shouldn't happen again.
More than happy to take that one on notice as you haven't observed it yet or received any.
You can smell it before you see it. Apparently.
And just on that, it says distribution of quarry products, but doesn't mention the newer products there. That's still part of it. I think that should be
It's
mentioned.
all part of it.
Yeah, it should be mentioned in that description. Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. As far as I know, the people that own the B&B above there, they were complaining about the smell of fertiliser, of cow manure that's been already brought into the site. Now, I haven't been out to have a look. They rang me up and told me about that. So there must be some activity there as far as I can understand.
Well, I think staff will have to determine whether it's fertiliser for the existing farm or fertiliser for the separate business. So, thank you, Councillor McLeish.
Mrs. Mayor, just reiterate, I already thank Fiona privately, but thank her publicly and to her staff for the wonderful job they've done on Cooks Road. It was an absolute mess until last week. I drove over it yesterday. It was almost a pleasure to drive over it. Almost. We should get that bitumen on soon and we'll be right.
Keep plugging.
Page 23, there's just a thing there about having trouble getting volunteers for the School of Arts, I think it was. Just like to go back, I spoke to the general manager about it yesterday. About 15 years ago, former councillor the late Keith Pixton, came up with the idea of a volunteers expo at the Memorial Hall. And none of us really thought it would work, but every organisation was invited to have a stand. And believe it or not, we filled the Memorial Hall up and we had to have a cover on the road outside. It was a fantastic day and lots of people didn't even know that certain organisations existed in the town. And I spoke to Daryl and he's going to throw it onto one of his new staff members when they come, but that could be a possibility for later on in the year. It wasn't just the sites, but there was live music. We had a wonderful band in Tenterfield at the time. I forget their name. Jan Reid was in it, and a few other ladies. Random selection, and they performed and other things, and there was barbecues, and it was a real like a friendly atmosphere for the day. So hopefully we might be able to all get something like that going later on in the year. Everyone was just surprised how many organisations there were in Tenterfield that have volunteers. There's probably 50 or at least at the time.
That's
right. Yeah.
So that type of activity or recording that, it's really important to do that in your operational plan so that you can, so that it actually makes its way and you can monitor the progress. So I know that we've got some new councillors, but now's an ideal time as council starts to discuss next year's operational plan about what you'd like to see and what's reported on. And you may not, as I said, it's not immediately obvious. So I just thought I'd point that out, that if that's, the council's wish, if you put that in there, then obviously that becomes something that.
And I raised that at the emergency committee meeting and they were all very in favour.
I think through the mayor, they might be the best lead agency, but I've already spoken after our discussion. I have spoken to one of my team members, start looking at possible financial assistance to help set it up, but they may be the lead agency rather than council as well. But we agree with that.
I think apart from the hiring of all, probably doing kind, there should be no real cost.
Council, we can't do anything in kind anymore because we can't afford it. I just remind council.
Next one, page 27. This is another old chestnut of mine. About page 27, about the relocation of the honour boards and the artefacts, etc. General Manager, was it Fluid Award going back up on the wall out there shortly?
Yes, I know. You've been asking about this quite often. It is on our radar. It hasn't been a high priority. Look, we've just got to work out where, how, when, what the case looks like, what space we have, I guess. But it hasn't been. It's on the radar, but I apologise. It hasn't been high on my agenda. No. But I'm happy to review it.
There's a number of items.
Yeah,
we have got those rewards. I have checked; they are in existence. We haven't lost them. Yeah. It's just identifying the best place for them, I guess.
Just for the benefit of councillors, I think it was back in about 2001. I was the only councillor who's still here that was here at the time, council won the Blewett Award, which was the top council in New South Wales. Very prestigious award, and that's what I think it deserves. There's only a plaque about so big. It's not, doesn't take up the whole award. Next one is another old favourite of mine on page 48. This is about the untidy blocks in decrepit buildings in the town. One in particular, the Director of Environmental Services about 10 years ago wanted to condemn it. The owner came back and said, oh no, we're going to restore it. Nothing has been done at all, except it's just got worse and worse. So I think most of us could, off the top of our heads, think of 4 or 5 buildings which need to be gone. Also several yards which need to be cleaned up. So I don't know if we need to monitor or actually be proactive and start doing things about condemning some of these buildings and making people clean up their yards. I won't mention any yards in particular, but I think we all know which ones.
We are proactively regulating that, but it is difficult. There are
Nothing's
people,
happening, Colin. That's the thing.
well, some of them, and so this is the issue when you start to add on costs and cleanup costs and things like the recovery. This is one of the challenges. It has, well, it will obviously improve because we now actually have the ranger back in situ. So we've gone some considerable. And a lot of the things that we're bringing up are just that we don't have the people to go around and do the jobs that we've got on the list. They haven't fallen off the list. So as Leah started back with us last week. So now we've got a full-time ranger back in situ so we can actually start to do some of the compliance monitoring. Notwithstanding that, obviously those costs attributable to the cleanup go back to the block, but they also, we need to be cognizant, I guess, that we'll be able to recover through various means and to make sure that we actually operate within the legislation, which is the appropriate notice period. So as I said, whilst we're not seeing the outward evidence, the process is still going on in the background to try and get us to that stage.
Yeah, but everything looks at something that's, no matter what you're doing, nothing seems to change. I know it's a system, but.
And not only that, we have had staff make direct approaches. Some people we've tried to be very collegiate in those approaches, and it's a bit of a case of as soon as we remove 2 things, they're replaced by 15. As soon as we move, have 1 truckload of stuff that goes out the gate, the next truckload comes in, and there's only certain things that we can do within the legislation, and that's what we're monitoring at the stage. So it hasn't been forgotten. It's not important stuff. It is in there. It is reported on. I guess we're trying to manage that as best we can, but I do acknowledge that it's difficult to see where we've been.
Okay, I'm sorry to take up so much time this morning. My last one is on page 78. It's to do with the graffiti in the public toilets. I was wondering, we had the discussion before about the possibility of putting in cameras. I don't think they're all that expensive to do. Pulse camera might deter the people who I see a camera there and thought I better get out of here. It says, I think if you can catch someone and prosecute them, it'll probably save.
So to use a camera so you can identify people, but to actually use a camera in support of a case against somebody, there are certain rules and requirements, and that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. So once again, you need to actually make sure that they're calibrated, the access to the footage, etc., a certain type of camera. There are some legislative requirements around that, and the use of monitoring CCTV once you go to the police. Now, we can, of course, consider that. Like everything, we've just been constrained by the cost of a lot of things at the moment. So we're really trying to balance what we've got and what we can actually spend at this point in time. And obviously to those, because of the nature of those facilities, any ongoing observation will be from the external part of the facility. Obviously, we won't be having cameras in private spaces like toilets, etc., etc. So once again, that determination of whether or not that person has entered the building is the person actually undertaking those activities is also going to be a little bit different to point out. We end up making assumptions based on individuals, which may or may not.
We'd also referred to, like I've asked for reports of bullying. So we've had reports of bullying in the parks, and also there was damage to Jubilee Park, to the playground equipment recently, etc. So if we can
particularly in 2 or 3 parks here, as a deterrent, it would be, I think, worthwhile investigating the cost of it anyway. So councillor Nye, then councillor Sutton.
Thanks, Mrs.
And,
Mayor.
oh, you went on.
On the same issue, years ago, councillor Petty and my site went over to Inverell. And we looked at Inverell's CCTV system was absolutely brilliant. So the issues of privacy, the issues of how it's disseminated, the issues of obtaining information have basically been all answered. And I believe their system was actually grant funded anyway.
So there is a process. I've actually put one in Gunnedah. So all of their CCTV, they spend over $700,000. We have the same thing with issues with shopfront and vandalism. That's what I'm saying, that the how to do it is answered. The what you need to do in terms of those expenses, which comes back to signage, monitoring, access to police, having protocols in place.
I think in Inverell, they physically had the monitors sitting in the police station, and they were actively monitoring those. They couldn't use the data for court action. They had to do a court order, which was kept in a secure council chamber process.
Not the chambers in the building.
Yeah, but it's always been an issue of mine, and something we should move down towards if it needs first looking at grant funding. I'm pretty sure theirs was grant funded, and the process from there, it's an important issue, and any social behaviour, especially with the changes now and futures going on, we need to address it.
Happy to have a look at it. As I said, at this point in time, the requirements for that type of funding are heavily reliant on the social data available from platforms like Boscar. And what that tells you is the level of antisocial behaviour that you have. We are very, very fortunate in Tenterfield that we are nowhere near dealing with some of that antisocial behaviour that you'll find in some of those other localities that have been funded, which I think we're very lucky for at this point in time, but there's no reason why we can't look into it. Remembering, of course, that anything along those lines is an additional asset of the council that does require, ongoing management. And so it's whether or not that trade-off between the amount of graffiti and the antisocial behaviour and the cost of that will be offset by the cost of managing that. We'll bring that to the council at some stage. And as I said, I just can't identify. If there's a specific timeline, by all means, put that, as we talked about, in the operational plan, if that's something we want to see within that time frame. But I just have to resource getting the reports with everything else that's going on.
Thank you, councillor. I think there may be
Question through you, Madam Mayor, to the CEO on page 42, operating expenditure. Already in 7 months to, 8 months to February, it's 125% of budget, meaning 25% over, which equates to about $177,000 over budget already. Could you please explain why that is the case?
Well, basically, that's because when we did the original budget, we made there's a whole raft of reasons, but primarily there's inflation in there. There's some assumptions were made in the original budget. Do you want to
So, sorry, we're on finance and technology. Is that the case?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the answer is that the internal recharges haven't been attributed as yet. So we recharge different areas. We're still looking or undertaking a process of reviewing whether those amounts are correct, and finance is the home for that. So it doesn't actually directly relate to the service. You'll notice the income, for example, in finance is all of the rates. All of the recharges are also sitting in that account. You'll notice that it was the same last month. And as I said, they haven't been allocated at this point in time through the monthly journaling process.
Okay.
So I'm talking before you looked at the general.
No, that's all right. Sorry.
Thank you for jumping in, because I was going on a whole different direction.
Just when you said that,
I didn't look at that.
So the finance section is the home, I guess, of a lot of those things, and we do recharge out of it. So if you see an issue in there, it's primarily about those processes and whether or not we've been able to undertake those journals.
Thank you.
First of all, going back to what John mentioned before, I noticed that in management of the roads, our ranger, I can't remember who now compiled it, said that they are continuing with, unsightly things. I've noticed that it's the same report every month. It's exactly the same report every month. I work on the main street, so I do know that there are cars that park continuously in the main street for a whole day. As to where yet there have been no fines. could we maybe, assuming we need a bit of income and revenue, could we sort of get rid of those people not get rid of them, but make it possible? I have to go to doctors sometimes with my dad and I can't park out the front because someone else is parked there and they've been parked there all morning and they'll be parked there till the evening. So could we get the ranger or whoever it is, the officer, to go along and just do a few rounds of that? My other one is on page 32, which is workforce development. Are we privy to know what the public liability claims that we're dealing with are for? And if we...
So once again, so as a council, the answer is no. They are reported to the Audit and Risk Committee in detail and you get a summation of those as a council, because obviously that's internal information of the council because they're dealt with by the insurer.
So do we know how much this amounts to?
In terms of the liability to council, so the insurer manages the claim, so we're only liable for the excess, which you will see reported in the budget figures, depending on whether those claims are successful. And as I said, they are tabled as an aggregate to the Audit and Risk Committee so that they know how and basically for what types of incidents they're occurring, but there is no identifying information of individual incidents that are referred to within those reports.
Okay, and then with the cattle sale yards, have we ever seen, because we've got obtaining design and quotes for the installation of the double height loading ramp, how is that progressing? Can we have an update on it? Because this is exactly what was written in December and January. So we're now in March. Could we have an update on that?
Mr. Councillor, so do you want to, I haven't got anything further than the sale yards committee. It's just a case of resources. And that's pretty much where we run back to, is whether or not we've got enough people to manage that. So David and most of the staff have been more heavily involved in trying to do or develop obviously the upcoming budgets, etc., and manage the roads and all the road network issues. And so we have one person doing that. So I dare say that that's gone down the chain a bit as well in terms of importance, that we would assume that getting our disaster recovery funding in and expending those funds on roads would take precedence in staff time at this point in time.
Then it's always trying to find a way to get money into the coffers. I noticed that Optus pay rent of $7,701 per annum instead of the $8,500 per annum they pay. Could we, because in the end, the poor chap that leases the grounds around the water treatment plant pays almost as much as a telco. Is there a limit to how much we can ask the telcos to pay on rent?
Well, basically, I suppose it's a market adjustment and what they're prepared to pay. And depending on what they're actually using it for. You can't just pick a telco. You can't charge somebody by virtue of what they represent, but what they're actually consuming.
Okay, so why haven't they been paying? Why haven't they been paying the correct amount?
With regard to Optus, because we haven't finalised. And no, don't quote me, I'm not sure if it is Optus or if it's another one, because we haven't finalised. We've been in the process of negotiating a new lease arrangement. And what we've said to them is that we won't enter into a new one until such time as they pay any arrears that we have outstanding from our original agreement. So bearing in mind that these agreements are implemented as they come up and for a variety of different things.
Okay. And then I think if we have a look on page 73, where we have the building and amenities, we've got 42000501, which is the admin building and the refurbishment. Can you just explain to me, because I'm not good with figures? Okay then, so I think I said page 73, the COA 42000501, admin building refurbishment. Last month, it was in the review budget, it was 188,605 in the actuals. Now it's 189. Can we just find out why that's increased, why we've spent more?
We've still got our defects liability period, so we still haven't finalised that at this stage. So things that aren't working, there's a variety of small jobs, and it's whether or not they're covered under the defects liability. But I suppose the point is that they're not material in terms of making those decisions as people decide that they want extra things. Example, instead of having it stationary, it's been booked that somebody wants a whiteboard. So, you know, all of a sudden, rather than go to the stationary, it's been booked to that account. So that's what we're going through.
So how much further will this be going up? Just as a matter of interest, will it be going up much more?
It depends on the defects and who's responsible for the labour. So things like the door handle the other day pulled out of the wall socket. So that's covered by defects, but you have to get people to come back and actually fix the defects. So we're allocating it all to that building. And part of this is not just the budget, I guess, it's part of the work in progress capitalisation of those items. So it's not foolery, but to get it into a capital budget, which goes back to your ratios, you need to put it to a capital account. So of course, if there's a capital home for it, we move things into capital rather than operational expenditure, because it gives you a different result in your statements.
Okay, and then you go on that same page, you've got the Memorial Hall Sporting Complex. So the original grant was for about 996,000.
There's 4 different grants that are associated with the Memorial Hall. 5 now actually.
It's 963
with disaster funding.
So because I've been trying to make heads or tails of it, and you know, most of this stuff, if you look then back on the big sheet, which I must have left at home, a lot of these things were grant funded.
They are, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Could we have not simplified, but something easier for the everyday Joe Blow like me to understand where all the money has gone to?
Colin has actually done
Oh, you've done that.
a summary.
I've provided a couple of summaries and it's still shift. So as I said, we've got some additional funding. There's other things where we've had those discussions too. We made an original allocation of 150,000 at that time to get the dollars in the budget. We already talked about that. We didn't believe that was enough at that point in time, but we'd make that allocation, see where we landed. And I think we will still land over that amount in terms of the roof restoration, bearing in mind we're still, you know, we had the other day, we've got the 3rd tower up at 6, I think, while we're doing that restoration work. The bolt manufacturer got flooded out in Lismore, so all of a sudden I've got no bolts. These are the ongoing issues we deal with. So they're flooded out. So then I've got an extra 2 weeks of scaffolding on top of that because I can't get the bolts for them to complete the work, and so on and so forth. The price of steel already went up within that. So we already had a variation from one quotation we got to the next one based on the price of steel. And that's what I'm saying about the materiality. I will never get it down to a couple of dollars. I try and keep it under about that 5 to 10%, which is where we're currently at. When I tell you that that's the real price, and we talk about the real price in dollars all the time, do we think we can get the Memorial Hall for 150? I'm going to try, but no, I don't believe that will be the case. I think those numbers will be high, but that's all we can allocate at this point in time to try and make sure that we come out as lean as we possibly do.
So just to make it clear, the entire Memorial Hall works were grant funded from 4 or 5 different streams. Well, there's a new one.
There's another one too for the floor resanding, which is on
fans.
hold. So we keep doing that.
But the one that isn't grant funded is the work they discovered required doing because the original roof plan was not designed for a later council addition of all that sheeting, heavy sheeting, and therefore the engineer said, oops, that's not fit for purpose anymore, and that's requiring this additional work, or else, and we're not allowed to use it because they said the perceived risk is too great in case it failed, in case there were sheared off bolts, which is why we have to either fix it or shut the door. So that's how that comes out. Any more questions for the councillor King?
So I had 2 from quite back when Councillor McNish was talking.
That's a long time ago.
So talking about cleanups and what's happening throughout our shire. I didn't even keep it. I think it was 40. It was discussion about cleanup. Sorry, 48.
58.
For instance, there's a number of businesses in the Main Street area that have been vacant for quite some time. And I believe that most of the businesses that are being occupied keep the front of their business pretty clean. But the businesses that aren't being occupied are starting to look very, very shabby and very, very dirty. Now, who looks after the cleanliness of it? And, you know, I know that they're...
We've sent them letters, and so this comes back to the regulatory power. So just because we've talked about that, there's some internal mail, but we've sent letters to the owners and to the agents about the presentation they're doing, but I don't have any regulatory type powers unless it is unsafe. So if the veranda is coming down, or if there's something that's actually causing a public safety risk, I think I can regulate that, but I can't regulate things that are just general cleanliness and tidiness, and that's been an ongoing issue as well.
So the weekend before last, we had roughly 1,000 people come into our town extra for the gravel and granite. It was a hugely successful event, but there was no extra cleanup done of any of those Main Street businesses or anything for that event. As of tomorrow, we've got approximately 350 people coming into town again for our Rotary event. Is there any potential opportunity for someone to just look at the front of those buildings? I know it's a cost, but at the end of the day, when these people come to our town and see a nice, clean and active town, they may decide to, you know, live here in Tenterfield or invest in our town. You know, we've got Oracles following on from that. We've got the Car Club doing their event. We've got the Peter Allen event at the School of Arts building. We've got the Autumn Festival. We've got 2 golfing carnivals coming on. I just think autumn is our special time in Tenterfield, and we're not putting our best foot forward. I know it's a cost, but I really think as a council we need to look at it.
So can I just for the mayor, can I just qualify that? Are you talking about council-owned buildings or private-owned buildings?
Privately owned buildings like the fish shop.
We don't have any
Cinema.
power to do it though. That's what we're saying. We don't
So
have
the
any authority.
pavement in front of the, I'm talking about
council
the pavement, yeah, sorry. The
But we have
pavement.
to have the budget for it. That's the other thing. So as I said, we have to actually have the staff and the dollars to go outside our normal. So we try and allocate that, but as we get more funds and more functions and events, what we're asking is for, and I can't ever think of the right words, but is an increase in service basically that will be down there, that will have more street sweeping, that we will have more sanitation. We've basically got 2 staff, you know, working on the garden beds and the cleanliness of the Main Street all the time. If we want more, and Bruxton Park, if we want more people to try and get around, then we need more dollars, I guess, attributed to it to do that, and to know what we're talking
But
about
talking
doing.
about the people doing a fantastic job with the gardens, and I'm not saying they're not.
No, it's not that, it's just that, you know, what.
I have
we've
had
gained
people
stuff.
comment that they watched one of our Tenterfield council staff sit and pull buds off the top of flowers for many, many hours the other day. But the basics of the, you know, giving the bins are clean and just those basic things seem to be missed. Right beside that garden, there was a pile of rubbish that wasn't picked up by the gardener. So is there any checks and balances, I suppose?
I think there's a few. I think there's always room for improvement. I don't think anybody ever argues that things are perfect. And that's what I'm saying. I think it depends, I guess, on the number of people and what their tasks are at this point in time. So if we want to see things like gurning or cleaning of the main street or additional street sweeping, that's kind of at a cost, which those staff don't necessarily do the street sweeping. How often does the street sweeper come down? We've got a contract for that. We've looked at even reducing that because of the cost constraints that we face. And I suppose that's what I'm saying, the balance is not that we don't necessarily do things, but as we have more events, more people coming into town than what we've had obviously over the pandemic, and when things are shut and those increased demands, that we need to work out, you know, whether or not we need to fund that more, or whether or not there's a certain standard that we're happy to maintain.
May I just make a comment in support of Kim's comments? We had a camper come down for the first Friday Summer and Stars thing, and they actually come back to us saying, amongst other things, that they felt I don't know whether it's justified or not, but their comment was that the main trip seemed to be grubby, was their words. I'm just wondering whether, for the sake of what Kim's on about, by running a water truck down there with a guy with the hose hosing, knowing that we've got these functions coming up, or maybe once or twice a year, it's not a huge cost to council for what would be only be a couple of hours with a water truck and a guy with a hose. I think that might be a reasonable thing when we do have these major events coming up.
I suppose happy to take questions on the MOR, but I think that that's a bit more of a servicing discussion, making sure that we're clear on what those expectations are. At council's direction, I'm happy and with the appropriate budget to go forth and make any of those amendments. We just need to know what your expectations
I
are.
think there's a pretty fair expectation that the town's kept clean.
But going back to that, and so just as my experience of being at that function when your visitors were there, the park was spick and span and cleaned. All of the litter had been removed under the trees. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, there'd been a series of other people in the park who'd left behind their rubbish, of which staff and individuals were picking up at that time. It's all new litter. It's not. It hasn't been there for days.
I'm not talking about the park. I'm talking about, for instance, in buildings like the fish and chip shop, the Chinese, the vacant buildings.
So we don't clean their front facade. So that's I suppose the service.
I'm talking about the footpath, the cobwebs, the bins that are out the front of them, those sort of jobs.
So we can look at through the mayor, we can look at those service levels, but I will say, got to be a little bit careful. I don't mean to be smarmy about this. Yes, it's only a little cost, but there's a lot of those little costs that you want that we have ambition for. They add up to be big costs. So the water cut, yeah, we could do that. Am I taking it away from another job in the road? I don't know. Maybe. And if we're happy to compromise on that, that's fine. And likewise, it still is a cost. I still have to pay the driver, the fuel, and any other costs that are attributed to the process. We can do it. We can do anything. But I will, and you're going to get sick of me saying it. Yes, I know for that one activity, it's a small cost, but it's a small cost that goes on the credit card. And they all add up. That's how families get into trouble.
I see it though, it's when you have guests in the home, you sweep the floors.
Yep.
It's our pride in our town. I think for the sake of a water truck, all it's really doing is sweeping, getting and the cobwebs. That's what you do when guests come to your home.
So in terms of maintenance, that's what I'm asking. So for the clear direction, rather than because to cost that is. For every event, do we do that? Is it a fortnightly cycle? Is it only within particular periods of the year?
How often is it done, Carl?
I can answer that off. No, that's not correct.
What if we get?
We've got a maintenance schedule that we go forth and they tick it all off in terms of, we don't just willy-nilly go into it, other than extraordinary requests, exactly what we're talking about, that something special happens and we all rush over this side of the boat. So then by that stage, it's like, oh, my park hasn't been mown this week and we're supposed to mow it every 3 weeks. Then we rush over there. So it's a balancing act and we try and balance that in the interests of everybody.
That's fair.
So we'll get, so Darryl and team can have a look and see what's possible, what's the cost, and come back to us on that, knowing that this is a busy.
I mean, most councils have a Zambezi, for instance, that goes up and down the street every morning. We can't afford that. So they're happy to look at the service levels. I'll have to work with the team responsible and the asset, and then we'll come back and have discussion with you guys of what you think is reasonable, and then we'll put a number against it. And again, as I always say, we can do anything, but it's like everything, the theory of relativity. For every action, there's a reaction.
But also,
and that's what we need to be
Kim's
aware
point
of.
about cleaning the bins and those sorts.
Yeah,
of things,
absolutely.
which should be normal stuff.
Yeah.
Kim, you
We have
I have got one more question, but I just feel that we need to be preemptive. We know that autumn is a busy time for the year, so worked into those workloads prior to all of these events beginning, we need to be looking at it.
So just a quick question, when do we set service levels? What's the process? Because I'm a bit vague.
They basically remain the same. And so, for example, things we talk about autumn being a busy time of year, even in terms of where we can save costs. We've looked at everything in terms of those budgets and the numbers of people. Autumn, we also have, which is, I think, a fabulous level of service for Tenterfield. We also have our leaf pickup. So you've only got so many staff in terms of that period, and we add on a lot of those extra works during that autumn period that people really rely on. So that's what I'm saying. It might even be a contract cleaner or something.
It might be a choice, as Kim talked about deadheading, instead of deadheading, some flower things, sweep instead, wipe down, and change the job, the priority of the jobs. Kim, you're second.
So my second point, which was
And
brought
then
up,
Greg and Tim.
sorry, a couple of times through the week by different members of our community. Approximately 18 months to 2 years ago, we did a lot of advertising about a grant that we received, 600K for the truck wash at the sale yards. And I'm just wanting to know, have we received that money? I know the truck wash hasn't gone in. Where is that project at?
So we've spent, I think it's 120 odd thousand of the grant in design, etc. And we haven't actually claimed for the additional 490 odd thousand still available, because all of the conversations that we've had at the sale yards and others is in and around that we haven't got any designs that fit in with that budget. The designs that we've got are more than double, and the operational costs are expected to be too high. And so there's that continued conversation about what we're legally required to put in, and then what people wish to see in terms of something that's functional. So I don't believe we've ever answered that final question to do anything.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The discussion about the Memorial Hall reminded me that during the process we're going through, trying to find more cash and looking at installed assets, etc., it was revealed that we don't actually own those blocks of land in White Horse Lane. The RSL apparently don't own them either, that's Crown land. The Memorial Hall, who owns the Memorial Hall? Do we lease it from the RSL and they're the owner?
There is an agreement, and I'm not going to call it a lease because it's only a peppercorn and it's quite old. I haven't gone back and reviewed it, which I should have done. It's just the number of things. But yes, it is on council's asset register because we assume control of it, but it is an RSL hall and remains in their ownership essentially, even though it's still on our books.
Today's not probably the time, but it's a sinkhole for money. I'm suggesting we move to cancel the lease and no longer put any more money into that hall, because it is costing us a lot of money for depreciation. I know that a lot of the work's been done under grant funds, but it does not make economic sense to me to continue to pour money into someone else's asset. So if we can put that on the agenda for future discussion, please. The second matter, while the discussion was going on, your letter out to businesses in the street has obviously taken effect. There's no more bills posted under the door of the fish shop. So I don't get a dig in the ribs as I go past and Sue. Can't you do something about this? No, we can't. But we've written and it worked.
And we don't just write, like, once we don't get a lot of traction, we write, we call, we track down people that aren't here and around. And as I said, but we don't have the power, to actually enforce that kind of action. We're trying to coerce people to do the right thing.
Madam Mayor, can I just, to do with Councillor Sawyer's first comment? Councillor Sawyer, with respect, would it be better that we, and this is very supportive of our workshops, to do them more? Well, you've raised a really good point. Is that something we should have a really good discussion at our workshop?
Right. Why would anybody in their right mind who needs money, and we're going out to the community to ask them to chip in, why would you continue to pour money into a sinkhole you don't even own one tile in?
I'm not arguing that point. I'm arguing that the workshops are good because that information, even to have the Kyle Testament, even to have the peppercorn, the lease, the agreement, whatever it is. So we all know where we are with your suggestions.
But through the mayor, the problem with peppercorn lease is that on the surface, people get excited and go, oh, we get that asset really cheap. Yeah. But what comes along with it is all the responsibility for the maintenance, staffing of it, the depreciation, insurance. Yeah. It goes on and on and on, making sure you meet the fire codes. Yeah. They're often not. They're usually in favour of the lessee, not the lessor. Sorry, lessor, not the lessee. Yeah.
But can we knock that around at a workshop?
Absolutely.
There's also a community benefit, and that's the challenge with it. But even if you did return it to a community group, and this is where it's a bit circular because it's a community asset and it's held by the council, is that those groups, volunteers that we then charge with running that for community purpose, quite often don't have the funding streams either. So that's why we're continually evaluating that. And that's, for council to decide what is its role. I guess it's the same as all the conversations we've had before. what's our role in cleaning people's shop fronts, etc., to make the town look good to do that versus our role to have a community asset and an evac centre that we can pour some money in. So it's really important that as a whole community, we work together to get a good outcome, recognising that we've all got different responsibilities.
Keeping in mind, you've got to keep an eye on social capital. But having said that, it's probably timely just to consider that. And as my dad used to say, if someone's offering you something for free, just be careful of what the actual background strings are. So you might get excited about the peppercorn rent, but they're giving you, there's a reason generally.
Guarantee it'd be cheaper for us to rent it each time we want it than lease the bloody thing, pour money month after month after month into it, and cop all the flack for everything's going wrong. It's not our asset.
We'll move that to a workshop.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We can put that in. I'll get that.
Councillor
Okay, my objective is, of course, with roads.
Give us a page, big fella.
101, very simple one. Obviously, in my neck of the woods, or I should say our neck of the woods, is the Mount Lindsay Road. Budget was 5.7 million, sitting at 13,000. And I don't know whether it was inappropriate for me to do so. I was waiting on a pothole fix yesterday, as I do in my tractor, over in the ute. And so we're waiting there quite a while. I was like yakking to the fellow, and he said, mentioned it was the last pothole that they were doing because they're out of money. And so that's my question. Obviously, where we're at with that. But the second point is, and again, I declare that my gravel pit is right there, like it's 800 metres away from that pothole. Yet the truck disappeared back to Tenterfield to get DK, which I thought was quite a wild thing to have to do. I guess there was no loader. However, my tractor was going straight past, and they had an excavator there. But the truck disappeared back to Tenterfield to get unloaded DK, which they wasted half of. So that's my point of question. To anyone who's prepared to listen. Sorry.
I was unaware of the gravel coming out of Tenterfield. However, yeah, they probably weren't thinking that you had a tractor in the vicinity. Unfortunately, we're all trying to get on with different jobs, and sometimes your communication lacks a little bit. So we've got a lot going on. And yes, we have expended our regional road money. So it will be patching, but as for heavy patching, it costs a lot to heavy patch and to do it properly. So we'll be looking at doing further rehabilitation into the next financial year.
I must comment, I was, with my history in some roadworks, I was very impressed with the patching they did at that particular one. There was rocks balls going in. It wasn't a shoddy fix, it was a very good fix. And they look, and they do look, I shouldn't even say that, but it was a comprehensive fix, and the patches that were done up closer here, they look very tight and holding well. So,
and that's why the cost is a little bit more, because we're having to deal with the groundwater at the moment.
I do pity the poor guy coming on to the mulch one day, like trying to mix it all in and strikes a patch of rock balls.
I have it on good authority. We haven't got floating roads at the moment, but just
you'll notice why. I mean, and everyone going past, just put you in picture with the Mount Lindsay Road. It's obviously built on granite, and you can see the patches where the bitumen's broken, etc. But occasionally you go, especially my Land Cruiser, which is a bit heavier than some, the road just doughy. You know, you come along the patch, there's no break in the bitumen, but you can feel it sinking. It must be flexing underneath. That's only a Land Cruiser. Imagine big heavy transport coming along. These roads are destined to fail without more drainage.
We talked about this yesterday, and I'm not an engineer, you might want to comment, but I suspect part of the problem is springs, because quite a lot of this water, there's springs that don't normally run. So,
Final two questions, Gianna, and then Peggy.
Okay, now the last one for me today is page 1141, which is the water supply. Now, I've been getting lots and lots of questions over this. We have works that commenced for the new water filtration plant. Okay, this is exactly the same thing written over and over again. Could we have an update on this, please? What is the situation at the moment with the water filtration plant?
6 o'clock every morning.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a long time coming with some of the geotechnical problems out there. We've got big rock floaters out there where you might have actually seen the last couple of days, they've got some power poles up there. We're still waiting on section 60 approval, which we've got the we've got the agreement from DPIE. We still needed a signature from the minister to tick all the boxes. However, they're starting with obviously with their earthworks at the moment, and they'll be starting to import fill in the next couple of weeks. But some of the levels have had to be raised because we can't get the footings in, because we can't break the rock unless we want to blast or bring a rock saw in, which would cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's probably a lot cheaper for us just to raise the levels by a few hundred millimeters. So we're just waiting for a bit of a redesign on the floor of plant. And it'll be all go, and it's still programmed to finish by the end of this calendar year.
Okay, is there a feasibility study that we can have a look at? No. For that filtration plant, water filtration plant? I don't know, I've never worked for a council, so usually
There are
in
many,
business
many
you have a
studies and
feasibility
plans that have
study.
been going on that are requirements under DPIE to get to this point. And they've been going on since about 2014. And they're mandatory, they're things that we have to do. And it's been in collaboration with DPIE, who are the people that actually approve the water treatment plant, and Department of Health. So it's gone through many studies.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I can give you the feasibility study. The old one's stuffed. We're building a new one. There it is, in a nutshell. Through you, Madam Mayor, just quick, and Fiona, I don't know if this is you, just to do with what Councillor Sir Con has mentioned. That's been there for ages in that bottom paragraph. Can we move? Like, you still got return and sodden on Major Petty, and I don't mean anything by them. Just someone have a look at that and there, because I think, you know, what would I be doing out there turning sod if a community member brings it? The mayor should be there. Madam Mayor, I just threw you to our engineering staff. Fiona, I've been up there twice of it on in the last couple of weeks on the lagoon of Woodinbong, and look, it needs to be noted, you fellas are doing in the weather conditions you've dealt with an outstanding job on that road. Regardless of the lagoon / road meeting that we had a few weeks, and we challenged on drainage. The sea work you've done in the last fortnight on that curb and gut off, or curb and gut on them sides, great job, mate. It's going to come up quick, you know, really good. And I know it hasn't been easy for you, but I just need to know that these are gaining traction all the way. And the work down to Little Hockland in all that rock and what you're doing, Nick. What are they doing with the green bit? Because that's the funding we got there. They're all underneath it there tonight.
Yeah, that's Transport for New South Wales are working for us, so their bridge team are working for us. Yeah. And it's they're basically strengthening and performing.
Okay. And just while on that, Madam Mayor, just for our councillors, this year, obviously, as we know that the Sydney Harbour celebrates 90 years, and so does that bridge. Both opened the same year and designed by the same man. So we should note that.
We should have a little.
Yeah, through the year, and we should celebrate those things, because it's an outstanding
have
bridge.
a community notice about
Yeah.
that. Thank you. Thank you for advising us of that, and very timely. And look, I also want to reinforce what's been said from Councillor McNish and Councillor Petty about the roads. I had people contact me about the Timbarra Road, which was graded just before the weather event, and it's held up better than it ever has before. And there had been some drainage works done 2 years ago before it was last after it was last graded. So there is a floating issue under one bitumen patch, but that's nothing to do with our council staff. So that's been great. All in favour of receiving and noting the monthly operational report? Carried. Page 82, item GAB 2922, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. A mover and a second, please. Moved by Councillor Petty. Second by Councillor Nye. And the officer, Erica. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. The objective of the Audit and Risk Committee is to provide independent assistance to Tenterfield Shire Council by monitoring, reviewing and providing advice on risk management, control frameworks, governance processes and external accountability responsibilities. Committee members are in place for the term of council and where approved by council can be reappointed. The risk management and internal audit framework for local councils is currently forecast to be in place by June 2022 and will replace council's existing audit and risk committee charter. Council's committee name will also be required to change to Audit Risk and Improvement Committee in preparation for the implementation of the framework. The Office of Local Government has developed a new framework for Audit Risk and Improvement Committees, which was expected to be confirmed and in place for the commencement of the new term of council. We have been advised on the 11th of March 2022 that the final form of the framework is expected to be available and in place by June 2022. We have had further advice from the Office of Local Government that councils can begin to move forward, however, with that draft framework. So the proposal to change the name of the committee from Audit and Risk Committee to Audit Risk and Improvement Committee may be done by council if council approves this report recommendation. It is also considered that council can begin to operate with the replacement of committee members. Council was advised at the ordinary meeting of 24 November 2021 of the retirement of the committee chair, Mr. Jeff King. Our current charter allows for the two remaining committee members to remain on council with council on the committee with council's approval. The current committee members are Mr. Peter Shevel of BDO Thailand and Mr. Andrew Page, Director of Corporate Services of Southern Downs Regional Council. They have both confirmed their intention to continue on the committee with council's approval. Both Mr. Shevel and Mr. Page have been on the committee for one term, and that is the previous term just gone. Mr. Tony Hart, Director of Inconsult, has provided a biography of qualifications and experience and currently sits on two other audit and risk committees. Mr. Hart has confirmed his availability to take up the vacancy on council's audit and risk committee for this term of council. So the recommendation is that council approves the change of name of the Tenterfield Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee to the Tenterfield Shire Council Audit Risk and Improvement Committee and confirm the external independent members of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee to be Mr. Peter Shevel as chair, Mr. Andrew Page and Mr. Tony Hart as committee members.
Thank you very much. You have a question up.
Yeah, good. Through you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Erica, for the report. Just some questions, Madam Mayor, and I don't, through you and I don't, to Erica also. Peter Shevel, more than qualified to be, is it going to work with him on the Zoom thing in Thailand? I don't want to be problematic as far as chairing the meetings, because he's based there. And he's never, anyway, I'm asking that and I'm not being problematic. And the other thing, have we appointed, because Erica, you go on the page 83 with your background, and your members, obviously the mayor, and I think it's probably the mayor be there, and the other councillor, I suggest that if this isn't done, please tell me if it isn't, that councillor Knight would be a very good person.
Changed to just the mayor as an observer.
He's just the mayor.
So
Okay.
through you, Madam Mayor, yes, councillor, the changes that have been flagged in the draft framework have moved to one councillor, and that be the mayor as the observer, and it is a non-voting position. And the Office of Local Government confirmed that with the feedback provided by other councils in December last year, that won't be changing. So we can actually move forward with that, and council actually adopted resolution for just the mayor to sit on the committee as the non-voting observer. That was in the January meeting. With regards to your first query regarding the use of Zoom, in fact, the use of Zoom telecommunication technologies we were using before the COVID shutdowns of business in Australia. So we were actually using the teleconference mechanisms when our audit and risk committee members couldn't be present on site. That's certainly going to be the case moving forward. We certainly see for at least the next couple of years, the ability to attract a broader range of specialists and committee members with experience. We basically need to be able to offer that opportunity to use Zoom or Microsoft Teams, to use technology. So far, we haven't actually had technological issues, and with the upgrade of the systems in the building, it means that the Audit and Risk Committee meeting that we held in November last year, we had absolutely no trouble with Peter Shovel actually zooming into the meeting. That said, he also does, in a normal year, travel back to Australia on a regular basis. So both himself and Mr. Hart have indicated that where possible, they will try and attend in person. But for other purposes, there isn't really any reason why we should not allow them the opportunity to also use Zoom.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify, I'm not challenging Mr. Shovel's ability. He's an outstanding operator, but I just was clarity on that it was all going to work. It's an important part of our what we do as a governance of our council, and that's all good. And our Erica, you've answered all the questions, so thank you.
Madam Mayor, could I just speak on that? I did the webinar, Hit the Ground Running. Okay, I'll speak directly to Erica. I did the webinar on Hit the Ground Running regarding ARICS, and what they recommended for us new councillors was, because there's going to be there's going to be a very high cost. That's what the Office of Local Government think. They actually suggested sharing the resources with other councils. So if we do this on our own, we're going to have to take on all the expense ourselves because we're not sharing it with anyone else. Should we look at, as they suggest, sharing that with another council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's certainly something that we can look at as and when the framework comes in force. So it comes in force from June 2022. We're still being assured of that. We have until September 2024, which is the end of the term commencements of the next term of council, to have everything in place. With regard to forecast costs, at this stage, we currently run a fairly cost-effective process with our Audit and Risk Committee in terms of the additional costs moving under the framework. At the moment, we have 4 meetings per year. Only 2 of the 3 committee members are paid a set fee. We've managed to get their agreement to stay with that fee for the next term of council, and that's $1,000 per meeting ex GST. If you work on the basis that a meeting takes about an hour and a half and they would have 2.5 hours reading in, the hourly rate is $250. That is extremely cost effective for the committee members who in their private pursuits actually earn at least 4 or 5 times this on an hourly basis. So we've actually done very well with that. It's certainly something to look at down the track. We've not seen any other council yet discuss those costs. And we do need to consider, if we move to a group model, the cost benefits may be there for medium to large councils, and especially medium-sized rural councils such as Armidale and Tamworth. But then if it's, everyone has to pay an equal share of the pie, then that means a smaller council like Tenterfield may be paying well above what we may be able to achieve with managing this ourselves. So again, it's about economies of scale. So it's certainly worth doing the exercise once we've got the framework in place. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Erica. No further questions? All in favour?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now move to item GOV 30/22, the integrated planning and reporting. This is our draft community strategic plan, delivery program and operational plan for public submission. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Gregg, seconded Councillor Kidd.
Madam Mayor, Purpose of this report is to place the draft Tenterfield Community Strategic Plan, Tenterfield Shire Council Resourcing Strategy, Tenterfield Shire Council Delivery Program and Tenterfield Shire Council Operation Plan on public exhibition for public comment and feedback. All New South Wales councils are required to review and reconstruct all of their integrated strategic plans by 30 June in the year following a full council election. This means that Tenterfield Shire Council must review and reconstruct plans by 30 June 2022. Over the past 3 months, a project has been underway to review and rebuild all of Council's integrated planning and reporting documents in order to ensure that they are integrated, comply with the requirements of the New South Wales Local Government Act 1993 and the IPNR guidelines, and are structured in such a way to be more easily communicated to the community. This process would normally take place over a 6-month timeframe. However, with the change in election dates in 2020 and 2021, this process has occurred over a shortened period. A report on the community engagement process is attached to this report, and this is a report of the outcomes and feedback provided by the community during the engagement sessions in January this year. Through this process, a revised community strategic plan has been developed for Council to provide to the community for consultation and discussion. With the shortened timeframe and Council's current financial position, Council has also prepared the draft resourcing strategy, community engagement strategy, delivery program and operational plan that will also be placed on exhibition so that a holistic conversation can be held with the community. The documents that will be placed on exhibition are the draft community strategic plan, draft resourcing strategy, the draft long-term financial plan, the draft asset management strategy, the draft workforce management strategy, and the draft delivery program and operational plan, including the revenue policy and draft fees and charges. The community engagement strategy remains unchanged from 2017, other than formatting to match the current format of the above draft documents. And following consideration of community submissions and public comments, the documents will be presented back to Council for adoption of the final drafts at a later meeting. A multi-faceted community engagement program was undertaken for the rebuild of Council's draft documents and broader integrated planning and reporting documents. The documents will be placed on exhibition following adoption of this report's recommendations. While the minimum public exhibition period is 28 calendar days, Council may increase the period to ensure broad and comprehensive engagement with the community as possible. And so Council may consider an exhibition period of 35 days or even 40 days. And this is because the period from tomorrow following this Council meeting and the adoption of a recommendation to place the documents on exhibition means that the month of April has a lot of public holidays, and there are not going to be a lot of opportunities for members of the public to be involved in our forecast next round of consultation. So we are forecasting from the week of Monday the 4th of April that we will start to conduct further consultation sessions in villages and here in Tenterfield Township. The aim is then, with the number of submissions and feedback that comes in through the month of April, is then determine how many additional consultation sessions need to be undertaken after the end of the April period. So looking at late April, early May for any additional consultation sessions. The recommendation is that Council place the draft community strategic plan, community engagement strategy and resourcing strategy on public exhibition for a minimum period of 28 calendar days in accordance with the New South Wales Local Government Act 1993. Place the draft 2022-2024 delivery program and annual operational plan on public exhibition for a minimum period of 28 calendar days in accordance with the New South Wales Local Government Act. Undertake community consultation based on the scenarios outlined in the draft long-term financial plan with regards to making an application for a special rate variation to ensure council's long-term financial sustainability, and request a further report to be submitted at the completion of the formal public exhibition period detailing submissions received during exhibition for council's consideration prior to final adoption.
Thanks very much, Erica. Questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for some clarity, through you to either Val or Kyle or Erica, right here, page 89, and yes, receiving the correspondence and email to do with independent pricing regulations for the IPAC. So announced in March 22, New South Wales Council may apply for a special rates variation of 2.5%. God bless their results. A separate report will be provided to council when IPAC issues formal advice on this. Two questions. Does staff know of the time frame in that? Because it says when we receive formal advice on this.
And it's got to be in by the end of April.
Okay.
We don't have a process at this point in time. They haven't said you need to tick X boxes, so I can't tell you how long it will take, what level of consultation is required, and how much it will cost you to get to that point.
Okay. And I go back. What I'm asking is just a bit of clarity. That's all. And I'm not so much confused about it. But so we're gonna obviously that's what 5/8 of stuff all about our problems. But if we put in for that, are we still then to do with the report and going back to the resolution of council in February to do with the that report? Is that changing where we're heading in any way? I'm sorry, it's a bit round. I just want some clarity. So if what I'm getting at, if we're going to put in a application for that special rates variation, can we then go and put in November, and correct me if that time frame's wrong, for the one we've been talking about?
So through the mayor, they're all very good questions. And Kyle and I have had several discussions over it. The problem we've got at the moment, we actually don't have a process. Now, what I suspect, if the process is, oh, you can just do it, you don't have to do anything, then you might consider it, but then you might consider, is it going to muddy up the waters, and how does it affect the process anyway? Or they might say you have to do this to get it, and the cost of doing what they want might outweigh the benefit. So without knowing really the rules of engagement, what are your thoughts?
There's also the yield, the yield that you would get even in a normal process on your rates is about $100,000. And so whilst that is a significant sum in anybody's language, the long-term financial plan just for our current resourcing identifies a deficit of 5 million. Well, 100,000 is still a long way from 5 million. So what we're saying is not that it's not material to people and having to pay, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. What we want to make sure is that we're not disadvantaged. Should council actually choose to request an increase from IPART to tackle that deficiency later on by not putting that in place and being able to do it, but it's also still the cost of doing that. So we don't want to spend $20,000 or $30,000 of time and resourcing to try and you're doing the 2.5 when we've just spent ratepayers' money for no, in my opinion, no good reason, because we've just chewed that up in administrative costs that don't add any value.
And just, I'm not taking away the job of staff member or you yourself, Mr. CEO. With their nearly 2.5 is a normal rate back anyway. You know, so all our council know. No different to what we normally get, but God bless them again, they reduced it back to 0.7.
Yeah, because they went, their modelling formula went that it went on population growth, not on costs, increased costs or anything. So,
thanks, Kyle, for you.
So we need to respond to the council and tell you what the process is. We don't know what the process is until the end of the month. The yield that you're looking at is about $100,000 within that period. So that gives you some understanding of the quantum you're talking about. You could make that adjustment, of course. Whilst we go through this process, the other important thing is we are resolving to make an application. Once that is determined, this is later on, like through the process, even once IPART has assessed that and agreed or disagreed or provided their outcome to the process, the council still resolves at the annual operational plan as to whether to implement what they're allowed to implement. So right the way through on those budgets, you will be able to make those fine-tuning adjustments. And that's what I'm saying, they are fine-tuning adjustments. They are not material changes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, through Carly. Do I understand really even if council went for a special rate variation of 2.5, the net gain is not 2.5, it's 2.5 minus the 0.7 it could have had. So really you're going for an additional 1.8.
That's correct.
Which is less money again.
Yes, and that's what we're saying, our normal yield of which we've been able to apply, and we've done this exercise, I guess, just legislative compliance, and I don't want to go down rabbit holes because there's lots of examples, but you know, that amount that we're able to increase the rates hasn't increased or hasn't actually paid for the legislative that has been shifted by the states in a 12-month period. And I'm not pointing the fingers at them, but it's just the quantum of dollars line.
And through the mayor, in general terms, what this is really saying is, and I think you attended a meeting recently where a lot of councils are saying, what the hell are you guys doing at 0.7? So in a panic, they've gone, okay, we've mucked up, let's do this. And they've actually made it worse because they've admitted, first of all, there's a problem, but they haven't given us a reasonable solution. So,
and rather than just say, yes, you know, we'll leave it up to the councils to decide, like as a transition year, they've said, we'll charge you extra money to prove to us. And we're not even sure if it's temporary or permanent, whether or not it's actually embedded or
the 2.5.
Yeah. We don't know if it's temporary for that year, that we can only collect for that year and then it's taken back, or if that would be included in the...
Yeah, so instead of saying, yes, we've made a blue, it should have been 2.5, not 0.7, go ahead and apply it if you so wish. They've now created all these hurdles in order to apply the 1.8 as Peter has lived. I'm just wondering, before we go into questions, maybe it's a bit easier if yourself, Erica, or Kylie could just explain to councillors the process of the public exhibition and the fact that because potential SRB is involved, obviously we have to meet IPART's requirement that includes more detail than just in these documents, you know, in clear terms of proposed cumulative SB rate increases, including rate pegs and in dollar and percentage values, where we'd be holding, over what time period we'd be holding, and I know everything you're talking about how many days, but I mean, because there's obviously be a lot of interest now that we have the draft out, and particularly coupled with a proposed rate increase, how we will time those meetings and in what way we will advertise for people.
Yeah, we've had this conversation, so I'll start off filling in the blank. There you go.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have actually drafted out a consultation timetable. So commencing with councillors and staff next week, and actually identifying the impacts of what people require or would like within their operational services, the impacts that has on the budget each year, and what that actually looks like in a financial table, what it comes down to against an average rate. So a base rate for a residential property, the base rate for farmland, and what each of those scenarios represents. So we start with that with staff and councillors next week. We move on from the 4th of April, and we've done a draft schedule of the villages around the Shire, as well as 2 sessions in Tenterfield. So we've actually organised to set up specific 2 and 3 hour blocks of time with a number of staff, as well as yourselves, to sit down and go through the community's questions. We will be providing copies of all of these documents, hard copies at each of these locations, as well as hard copies available for people to collect here in town. We recognise not everyone has access to the ability to print out these size of documents. So with respect to Tenterfield itself, Tenterfield Township, we've scheduled 2 sessions in that week of the 4th initially, a 7:30 to 9:30 breakfast time for those people in the community who can actually do that type of a session and then go to work. We also then have a session later in the week from 4 till 6 as well. That will also allow us to gauge what sorts of things people want to see with the next round of feedback at the end of April. It's also to explain that impact in dollar terms. I think the community has been particularly taken aback when we use large numbers, but sometimes then bringing it back to what does that actually mean for my property? And in some cases, and in a lot of cases, it may be $7 to $9 a week. So it's a case of at least explaining why there needs to be more money, explaining why the local government sector is funded this way and it is controlled by state government legislation, and then explaining what the impacts are specifically to each one of them when they come along. So not quite having that personal conversation with them, but providing information and a level of understanding that they probably really want to know about, but don't know where to find it.
Do we get breakfast with them?
Breakfast time. I'm not cooking.
Thank you. And the other thing of interest is today, I think it's today, Glen Innes Council are also discussing rate capping, and because that's part of our problem. No matter how many new people we can get here, we're still limited with what rates we can raise. And that's actually an item of discussion for them because there's been the paper put out. Questions now? Oh, sorry, I also did raise with the Chief Executive yesterday, the people of Sunnyside, the people of Bolivia are very keen to have a session there, and they do both have a very large catchment, and they're not technically a village, but they're very much a large catchment of people, which I personally think would be a good idea. We would
get more people if
yes.
you go to them rather than asking them to come here.
That's right. Yeah. And you could fit Bolivia with obviously Torrington, and you could fit Sunnyside with Mingula.
And through the mayor, I've made a commitment that and we will put a message that I'm happy to meet with anybody who wants a one-on-one and can ask me questions about how it all works and the processes. So obviously it depends how many people want to come and have that opportunity. I'll deal with it as we go, but I will put myself and clear the deck so I can have the one-on-ones.
That's good stuff,
Joe. Try to explain to people. I just want to also point out, and I know there's been discussion about some of the angst in the community about why, and I think I've spoken to most of you anyway, but about why we didn't raise all this at the community consultations, etc., etc. Simply, as I just want to just reiterate this, that we can't talk about anything till we have a resolution and a number telling us we can talk about it. Until that happens, it doesn't exist, even though it may be out in the community. And that's what today is about. We're just seeking your imprimatur so we can go out and consult and talk, and we'll take as long as we can take, keeping in mind we have to have a lot of this locked in and completed by the 30th. Or what's the actual deadline? Real deadline, so get it in June.
Yeah, well, so the June's, we want to make sure that we try and get to the main meeting because we need that period of time to actually implement, to start writing the reports, but also get the all of the budgets, etc., uploaded to the system. That's the IPR process. And we'd like a resolution at that point in time about what we're going to apply for, so we can actually write the application to ITAR.
Yeah. Any questions? Sorry, I'm happy to take questions. I just wanted to give you that background because I know you guys copped a bit of flack about it, and I just wanted to make sure when you talk to your constituents, you can hand in your heart and say we have to follow the legislative process, and it doesn't happen until. And this is the other thing obviously I'm concerned about, because I've heard the scuttlebutt in the community about, it's the administration that doesn't do this and doesn't do that. We can only do what you tell us to do. And I want to can you please, when you talk to your constituents, make that clear, because I'm not going to do anything unless I have a resolution to council.
And Madam, you raise a really good point, Darryl. And it's not only on an SRV, it's on everything we do. Good councils, and I do believe that this will be a good council. I really mean that with my hand on my heart, because you put your hand up as community members to do a job. We face a very, very tough decision. Anything we discuss, it could be how many roosters we're gonna change that, or how many dogs you can have. A discussion's not a resolution until it's in this thing. In that's legal. That's a document. It's for public consultation. They can get it, go and get it, read it. That's what we're going to vote on. What's in that? Not what's on Facebook, not what we spoke at the workshop yesterday about. That's a discussion that we've had. And we all go away and get a bit more information. Staff give us information to make a decision. But until it's in there, nothing, absolutely nothing.
I'll questions. I might just make our way around the room. If you and Tim will, right? Okay. No, Greg?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just to clarify, this is the range of options for the SRB. We're asking the public to give us feedback on, and it comes back to council for a final resolution.
Through the mayor, it's really the discussion starter. What you end up with may be nothing like that. It's just here's some
defined as a council with recommendations from the team. Here's what we're looking at. Give us your feedback on that, then we'll have the crunch discussion.
And the feedback might come up with a better idea. We're not saying we're omnipotent. We don't know everything. We're making something out, but it's just the discussion teaser or starter.
The only caveat, which is always the difficult part, is that the income needs to match the strategy that you put in, and that's a bit like we talked about today. We can do anything that the council decrees, but you have to fund it, and that's where it becomes.
And you're going to hate me within 6 months. I know that now, because all you're going to hear is, no, we don't have the money. No, we don't have the money. And it'll be little things. But I'm going to be blunt. That's the situation. And you know what? When people say, how did it happen? Well, because someone didn't say, no, you can't. And I know no one likes to hear, no, you can't. And unfortunately, that's the situation. I'm sorry, Councillor Bonnie, give me a perplexed look, but that's the bottom line.
So when people look at the long-term financial plan document, which has the high SRB proposal, just remember staff have prepared that to meet our current shortfalls and plus to meet the backlog of works. And so in the discussions that we work out, well, do we continue with that? That's where we need to make decisions, as Kylie said, to match budgets. And I would also ask out there in the community that with all the angst, and I have to say personally, as a family, we will be hugely impacted by such an SRB to the not at $7 and $9 at a few noughts. So yeah, it's a big deal. But just remember, councillors and council staff are members of the community, and their families are members of the community. So when there are some extremely concerning comments, personal comments made about our staff or our councillors, I take great offence at that, because remember, these are community people who would also be up for these potential rate rises, and you must not tar everyone with the same brush. And I would just remind everyone to be very conscious of that at these public consultations, and we will certainly try to make it as far-reaching as possible, which is why I've asked that we include Bolivia and Sunnyside. And I certainly hope that our staff and our councillors treat everyone else with respect and vice versa. So now, Peter, have you any comments?
No.
You're fine, Tom?
Tom.
Any questions?
Do you want to ask any questions regarding
I'm
this?
pretty right, thank you.
Yeah.
No, straightforward.
Cool.
I've got, well, 2 questions. The community review process, do we get a free look at that before the process happens, or?
So through you, Madam Mayor, so we're presenting.
Documents.
Yes, so these are the documents that have been provided in your report. So
More talking about
our presentation.
Correct.
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, so we're actually presenting to yourselves and to staff next week with the information and effectively a workshop format for councillors.
To formalise, we do need to give some notice to the community, because we're very conscious of that as well, to try and give as much notice to people about where they can actually see us in person to engage. And going back to even the engagement strategy, there's 2 parts, what we present and then where we're going. We don't want to do it on the fly, but we are not so inflexible that if we're not getting feedback that we can't hold an additional session or provide an additional piece of information. So we're trying to make sure that it's a really reiterative process, that it's not just us talking to people, that we're taking on board those concerns and actually answering that, and then going back and saying, well, did this answer the question, I guess, that you have.
The second question, subject to the resolution, is an intention to go out just saying this is the process to start a draft review to try and quieten some of the
Concerns.
concerns out in the community, that this is not council behind closed doors. We are physically just a resolution to actually start our discussion with you.
Open and transparent.
Yeah, so there's two points to that, I guess, council, sorry, through the mayor. When we've started up some communication which explains this is the discussion process, this is the consultation process, this is where you can participate and all the rest of it. So we're going to start, we do need to do some education, and it is part of the journey. But also at the same token, that's why I want to make sure you guys are fully armed, because you also are responsible for making sure the message gets out there, because you're going to get the phone calls and the emails, and I want to make sure that you are very clear in your messaging that this is the opportunity for you to, it's not, you know, to have your say in whatever. So I just want to qualify, when I said I'd say no, I meant no around subject to budget too. I'll say yes to anything you want, but my qualification will be, tell me how I'm going to fund it. That's what I mean, yeah. So I'll be saying, no, it's not in the budget, but it doesn't mean you can't direct us to go and spend money, but it goes on the credit card. That's what I meant.
My question is, Erica, you mentioned about the different rate categories and that, but so that would have to be additional information that goes out when we do our community consultations. And that meets that IPART requirement of being very clear in the different, it does require the different rate peaks, rating categories, the impacts of the different options to a dollar and a percentage value. And my final thing was just a few corrections. If everyone's happy, I can just take them offline with you.
What was the date of those communications, of those consultations?
So we're commencing, so community consultations commence on Monday the 4th, and at this stage, and it's draft only because we have not had an opportunity to consult with the associations. So we have a proposal of Drake Village on Monday the 4th, Tenterfield in the morning, and Jennings in the afternoon of the 5th of April, Legume and Liston on the 6th.
But these are tentative, are they not, for discussion at the workshop?
Yeah, yeah,
to make sure
confirmed.
there's-
It's yet to be
there's
confirmed.
advice. Yeah.
So this is what is draft. Thursday the 7th, Urbanville, and then back in Tenterfield for the evening.
You'll give me all of that.
No.
BYO. I can get a packet of sayos if you like.
Yeah, just an important clarification though too. There's a wordage issue that I kind of see emerging. We are now open for consultation. So should the council choose to adopt the IPR framework, they will also see for exhibition. People are free to write in their submissions, to email us submissions to the documents. We will be making additional efforts to go and speak to them in person and collect, or in a group setting. We will collect that particular feedback. They'll still have another opportunity online as well. So as of council's resolution of placing the documents on exhibition, we will take feedback from that point in terms of engagement, and then we will also run a process to try and actively encourage participation, but also answer those questions at the same time, which will include face-to-face as well as online. We're not wedded to one particular or procedural type view. As I said, I would imagine that there'll be communications from the mayor, from the chief executive in your local news forums. I dare say that there'll be other forms of media releases put out, that the documents on exhibition, how you can participate and so on and so forth. And by the same token, if at any point in time you do get feedback of not an area of miss, but an enhancement, we're more than happy to look at that as well within that time frame. But it does need to close so that we can actually get those papers into that main meeting for the final adoption of the council of whatever's decided. And bear in mind, if there are, it takes quite a bit of time to do the financial side of the calculations. So I'm not saying it's a fait accompli or what's in here is what's going to happen, but we need the appropriate time to rework the numbers to get it into your long-term financial planning process. That's the only sort of caveat.
Oh, sorry, Kim.
through you, to colleagues. So the survey that was released yesterday, is that part of this program or is that something totally different?
No, the survey, and I do apologise, I hadn't had a chance to, I did mention it yesterday. My staff probably got a bit overexcited. That's part of where, as I've mentioned to council, we're in the process of doing a draft tourism master plan. And part of that process is a community survey to get further feedback to go into that draft master plan. Unfortunately, I got a bit excited and jumped the gun, and it shouldn't have been released yesterday. And I do apologise, but it has happened now. We'll deal with it.
It does also provide some valuable insight into what people want. This is the juggle of the whole IPR process.
It's not a negative thing, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
I would have thought it and notified you. I'm embarrassed because I wanted to notify you that it was going out, and I didn't expect it to go for another week or so. And look, I'll give them credit; they're keen to get the process
No, it's
done.
positive. It wasn't a negative.
No, but we have had some negative feedback. That's all, because it was directed at businesses, and it wasn't. It just look, it hasn't been executed very well. That's on me. I apologise. I've spoken to my team, but I'm not going to crowd them too much because they're trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, no, that's great.
All right then, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Carried. Moving forward to item GOB 31/22, which is our asset management plan policy revision. Mover and seconder, please. Moved Councillor Gregg, seconder. Sorry, Councillor Chair.
You're back, mate.
And Fiona. No, David. Sorry, you're back.
Yep. Thank you, councillors. Madam Mayor, councillors, this is a pretty straightforward matter. It's just providing you with the existing policy, just to update it. There's no changes being made really, other than the version number and the date. It's appropriate to put it to council and have an updated version. One, to keep it current in accordance with our action plan for asset management and with the new council. But also it falls in, if we have it up to date, it then gets included as part of the asset management strategy, which falls in with the IPNR that we've just discussed. So everything just falls in neatly there to have up-to-date policies. I have noticed since doing the report though, and it's in the existing policy on the bottom of page 93, I would point out the second last word there. We're not actually talking about council-owned owed assets, it's council-owned assets. There's a typo there of missing inside.
Price for that.
We'll have that corrected. The only other matter I would or take the opportunity just to point out though, it's some detail in the policy. Obviously, being a policy, it's a higher level document. Councillor Sakai mentioned in another matter there earlier on today that we're about providing, hoping to provide a legacy for the children and the other generations. Our document actually clearly states that we have objectives there for ensuring intergenerational equity, and then at the bottom of at the end of this is on page 94, at the end of the policy principle, that we achieve the best possible intergenerational outcomes with net return. And I think that's a really important matter to consider with our budgeting. A lot of the assets and benefits that we have come from councils 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that they put the effort into building bridges where there wouldn't be creek crossings. We would have been driving on roads where when it rained, you wouldn't have gone anywhere. Now we've got bridges, we've got a lot of assets and infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we have that provided for the generations in the future, but not only that we just provide it, that it is equitable. They can maintain it, they can use it and afford to have those assets.
Which community expect to, though.
Yep.
Sadly. Madam Mayor, sorry, if
yes, thanks.
Just an online one, Madam Mayor, on page 91. No change being made to policy from November to 22. That's not right, David. Your date's not right, is it? Other than version number and the dates.
November 21.
21. Thank you. As long as we get
You catching on?
I can read, I can't count, but read.
Okay. Any questions? It's fairly straightforward. All in favour? Carried. All right. Now, Item GOB 32/22, finance and accounts period ending 20th February, page 99.
91.
Yes.
We welcome Roy. Welcome to your first council meeting, Roy.
Last time. Oh, it's a workshop.
It was a workshop. I thought he was still under.
Was in the box there, Billy?
That was it.
That's where you start. Sorry, moving on.
We have a second up.
This way. John? Do you want to share them about him here? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, councillors. Item GOV 32/22. The purpose of this report is to present the council's finance and accounts report for the month ending February 2022. In terms of our cash at bank, our cash book balance as at the end of February, the general account comprised of $13.126 million, and we had a general trust amount of $282,000. In accordance with the investment portfolio section 625 of the Local Government Act, of the 13.126 million, 6 million is invested in term deposits in various institutions. This 6 million is comprised of externally restricted funds, and no general fund money has been put into investment. Attachment is on page 102. In regards to the concealed water leakage concessions, there were no concessions that were granted during the month of February 2022. In regards to 603 certificates, there were a total of 31 applications of 603 certificates in February 2022. Council did apply, has spoken and been approved for a bridging finance loan from the NAB in the previous council meetings. We have currently put that application very much on hold and not to activate it at this stage, depending on the liquidity that the council will see in the short-term future and also the long-term future. We may take into that, but that has been approved by council, and we have also done some investigative work in terms of the rates. But we just put that on hold. We have not gone into getting that application. Any questions about?
Just a comment. Well, thank you and welcome, obviously, and I wish you well in your endeavours. Madam Mayor, the councillor in form, I want to just take one little second to thank Jessica for the outstanding job that she has done. Please pass it on, Roy. Yes, standing in the role in Paul's departure down to greener pastures. We are so lucky with our staff that we have such capable staff and young, keen and local to step up into that role. So just thank you, my staff. You've done an outstanding job, and I know you will continue to.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, I had that noted down. Just thank you very much for stepping into the breach, as it were, for so long, and welcome to Roy. You have a good team there, Roy. So just to make it clear, the overdraft that we've approved, we're not locking it in at current interest rates. We're just going to keep that approval sitting.
Well, it only locks in when the overdraft is it's a variable rate anyway. We only want to use it because it costs us money to action it.
That's right.
Not less. So we only want to use it in an emergency, technically, when we have a cash shortfall.
Yeah. So any questions?
Question through you, Madam Mayor, to the CEO. Do I understand, therefore, depending on what decision is made by the SRB, that could determine whether we activate that facility?
Through the mayor.
We activate it anyway.
No, through the mayor. Look, the problem. The SRB, no matter what outcome, will not actually. We won't get rubber on the road until 2024. Right. So in the meantime, that depending on our cash flow situation, that overdraft is there to make sure that we don't get into restricted funds. So in answer to your question, at some stage we'll have to dip into it between now and the SRB.
And Peter, part of that issue was that when we get grants or like recent, say, disaster grants, normally we get approved for something, we have to do the work, we pay for it, and then we apply to get the money refunded. And then there's months lagging. So that's why we have all these ups and downs. And that's why, and the other case for several years, which is why we put in place the overdraft facility, so to smooth that out. And luckily this time with the disaster, the government's actually paid us some money up front. So that's
Good.
very good.
Thank you.
$3 million for our council, 5 million for the worst affected councils. They've said 3 for 10.
It's an estimate only based on 2 days of the disaster and what it might be. And upfront payment of 50%.
Could be politicians promise the world and give you that.
Especially for elections.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so any further questions for Roy on this particular item? No? All in favour? Carried. Page 103. Item GOB 33/22. Capital expenditure report. A mover, please, and a seconder. So move Kim Rose, seconded Gianna. Back to Roy. You're sharing the light here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through Madam Mayor, the purpose of this report, the capital expenditure report as of February 22, is to compare the capital expenditure that has been budgeted to the actual amount of capital actuals that have been costed to it as at the end of February. The attachments form part of attachment 5 under attachment number 19. So any questions regarding any line items regarding the capital budget?
Want Roy to give any better explanation to what I was talking about before about the capitalisation of items within the capital report? Yeah, I've talked about, no, okay. Obviously did a better job than I thought, then if that's the case. It's an important consideration.
Any questions? No? Very good. All in favour? You're on a roll, please, Roy. Page 105, item GOB 34/22, proposed borrowings for our extension to the land, etc. So that is also.
It is, yes. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Councillor
Tom, are you moving this one?
Thomas.
Are you moving this item?
Yes, please. So we need also Madam Mayor.
Did you know you just moved this on?
No, I had to explain to him.
We need a recommendation. Sorry,
I just wanted you to pass this motion.
Dr. Cost provided.
No, we're moving that we're going to deal with this one.
Yes.
We didn't have
Councillor Tom and Councillor Gianna, are you happy to also include moving that we accept this additional document?
Yeah.
Happy days, thank you.
Don't speak up. Yeah,
like,
put your microphone on. It
Yes,
doesn't-
It's not working.
Recorded from above, Tom.
Thank you very much. Proceed, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through Madam Mayor, the purpose of this report is to get an agreement on the proposed borrowing for the current financial year, 2021-2022. A bit of a background, the adopted operational plan and budget for 2021-22 financial year allowed for borrowing totaling $5.904 million to fund capital expenditure, which included waste management, $3.3 million attributed to the Bono Development Stage 5 landfill project, and transport network component of $2.604 million to deal with the transport infrastructure works and other acquisition of any plan items that might be required for that purpose. At the proposal, we had an initiation, contacted 3 banking institutions, the NAB, ANZ, and the CBA, to get indicative interest rates for the drawdown of this already approved loan. We have received confirmation from the three institutions with a variety of long-term and medium-term loans and the effective interest rates which are indicated at this stage. We've done the calculations of the loan amortizations within our softwares, and we can conclude that on a long-term 20-year loan, if council does proceed with that, CBA does present the best value with the cheapest interest rate for a 20-year loan, and for the short-term 10-year loan, ANZ produces a bit of a cost saving for 10 years, but holistically, you might say that's a negligible amount in the scheme of things. Just to clarify, the loans, they are comprised of 2 aspects. One is the general fund, that is the transport infrastructure, and the waste, the landfill is for the waste fund. In considering the involvement of the monies involved and the administrative processes, what my recommendation would be to certainly look at transport infrastructure as a lengthy time period of loan, which is 20 years. And also I've considered the impacts of the cash flow within the organization. The 3 institutions in question, they've all requested a semi-annual 6-monthly payment of principal plus interest. And we have looked at what the cash outflow and compare that to any inflow that might come and the impact on council's operational working capital. So in terms of the $2.6 million transport infrastructure loan, my proposal would be to take the 20-year CBA loan. It produces a significant amount of cost savings, and it is the cheapest in terms of interest rate. In the document, I have put in waste management to discuss. The waste management, as at the December quarterly budget review, had a cash externally restricted balance of approximately $3.59 million, which is a good thing, because that's just saying that the waste fund itself is able to administer and do loan repayments, and it's not as a negative as the general fund is. The decision and for discussion, the question would be, do we take the CBA offer, which is a little bit higher than the ANZ, but in the scheme of things, for a 10-year loan, with comparing the CBA with the ANZ and the NAB, just as a comparison, 10-year CBA 4.21%, 6-monthly repayment of $203,000, compared to a 10-year one with ANZ 4.08, so that's where the interest rate of ANZ is low, of $202,000. It's only a $1,000 or $1,500 every 6 months extra payment. It's a pretty negligible cost from an administrative perspective to then select ANZ, and that's what I've said. My feeling would be to select CBA on that as well. So yeah, it means if there were any other discussions and ideas on how we want to manage the waste fund.
I'm just wondering, if we go with the 20-year, would we have penalties if we say we're able to pay some of the transport one off earlier or whatever? Would there be penalties involved?
The documents that the 3 banks have submitted to us have said that conditions would apply if there were early repayments to be done. So at the time of when we actually contacted the 3 institutions, we said we are looking for this amount of money, and it's on a capital projects, and it was purely based on the longevity of the loan. So there wasn't a discussion wasn't any discussion done on early repayments or any aspect like that, but documents we have received does say that any early repayment might have a bit of a condition of supply fees and charges attributed to that.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Roy or other CEO or colleague, just for some clarity, just a couple of questions, Madam Mayor. The 3.3 with the waste management, I have no issues with it. I thought we already done this, or were we just kicking it around that we making us as council aware that we needed to do this?
We did it in the budget, so it's been adopted. This council's already adopted the borrowings that we've forecast.
Yeah.
This report is to actually action those borrowings as per the budget. So this is the second phase, because it's already been written in there, but we can't. The borrowing policy and the act means that we need a council, it's a non-delegable function, and we need a council resolution on or an assessment in line with the borrowing policy of which funds you want to borrow, because we obviously can't forecast the costing down to the nth degree across that 10-20 year time frame until such time as we're ready to actually draw down that facility.
Now the question, and once again, see the you all Fiona, it's your corner, with the 2.6 for the transport infrastructure, that's talking infrastructure road or something, and the other supporting plan items. Mainly because I'm interested, what are we doing here?
This is the deficit, though, isn't it? This
It's the deficit of the transport
deficit of the
budget.
financial year.
Yes.
It's to finish the work we've already planned, sorry.
Well, it's not even finishing it, really, is it?
No.
It's
Trying to spin it positive.
It's our program of works for the year, basically.
Right.
It's topping up what we don't have in the budget, the deficit that we needed.
The 2.6.
Yeah. And that includes some capital purchases, well, some replacement, so under our plan replacement program.
Well, yeah. Is it a secret or?
Multiples, that's the trouble, it's a long list.
Okay.
Long list of percentages or individuals. It's not one mute, one whatever.
Yeah.
It's 10% of the Graham's inspection stuff goes to this one, and then
Right.
10% we need of that vehicle. It's not a one-to-one borrowing. That's what we're saying. It's borrowing to fund the deficit, which goes into all capital works within the transport section.
Yep.
As opposed to a thing.
Yeah. Well, it was fair, and would it be fair in saying, Fiona, that in your opinion, that our fleet is a pretty good order? But I'm talking trucks, the riders, the low loaders.
Most of it. Yeah, most of it. There's some older items are playing in there, but they're also not ones that are utilised to the same extent either.
Yeah.
They're there for good reason.
Yeah, and they need to be. Yeah, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Roy, have all these interest payments been brought back to net present value?
We do with the interest payments, because it's fixed interest loan, that would be.
Like interest payable 20 years out, current dollars is a lot less than it is in 20 years. So they've been discounted back. Okay. I would like to speak against the 20-year loan. If we look at the total CBA combined repayments, what we are doing is incurring additional interest cost of $1,683,000 compared to 10 years. And effectively, we're kicking the can down the road for future generations. So I'd be in favour of the 10-year loan.
Surely that depends on the serviceability of such loans, that will impact the spending in the short term to pay back a loan at a higher rate.
Well, if we
long as
take
it can be afforded in the budget, I certainly would support that to save $1.5 million, but at the end of the day, we still need to maintain the functions of council.
Well, if you look at, Tim, I'll take your point, but if you look at the total of our expenditure, the difference in the annual 6 monthly payment is $140,000. It's $280,000 a year. If we can't pay that, then we're in trouble. So, if we go the other way, we are going to be burdening the council over the years with that very large amount of extra debt.
Through you, Mayor, I would suggest that extra funding might that it would go into meeting those capital repayments, might just get my potholes fixed and a few roads graded. That's the issue. You know, we're struggling to get this maintenance works done, and any funds that we can find to get these graders rolling, I suggest we should be finding them. You know, but if we repay the loan quicker, which is obviously the best thing for the council, but it's not getting the potholes fixed and the roads graded.
Okay, but what I'd like to stress the point, Tim, that the CEO made, we're already on the credit card, and the more that we max out the credit card, the bigger problems are. We should be trying to reduce the outgoings.
Well, then services will drop.
And maybe that's the cost we have to pay.
Maybe.
It was just a comment that one of the biggest challenges with asset management, which has had it with David Council's report previously, is the concept of intergenerational equity, which is paying for things as they are consumed, and this idea of whether or not they are consumed within that period. And you're right, it's quite complex, that we accept that there is a discounting factor associated, and everybody knows, you know, $1 in your hand today is worth a lot more than in the future. So there's that trying to match off when you're actually paying for those assets and who's paying for that consumption in usual finance, or the cost of finance, I guess, is a cost of doing business for that period and to manage your consumption, versus you're quite well right being debt adverse. And it's something even with the Office of Local Government that there's an ongoing conversation about whether or not it should be paid for in those years that people are consuming it through debt smoothing finance, versus places that are debt adverse because of the cost associated with the financing. So it's always a balance, I guess.
I really think it's a very important point to think about today's children, because if for our benefit we want the better roads, we pass a large chunk of the cost of that on to the children. We're burdening the children of Tenterfield with what we wanted today.
True, but they do get to drive on it still, and they might want
those roads will be, by that time, 20 years, that expenditure will have to have been renewed anyway. So that asset is not going to be worth the same in 20 years as it was today. But I really think that what we're saying is, because we want things now, we're willing to burden future generation with our debt.
Couldn't agree more. That's a philosophical conversation. I'm just saying that in terms of managing that, you're quite right, but is also the challenge for the council, and given you both the rates to make that choice, but is whether or not, as we said, it's affordable, we're replacing those assets as they're being consumed, versus, and you're quite right, particularly when it comes to upgrading rather than maintenance and renewable type works.
The other thing too is that if we set our target of paying this off in 10 years, we have more incentive then to do the things we have to do to ensure that, for example, pursuing grants, looking at what council assets can be sold off to fund this.
And that's a decision of the council. As I said, we have at the moment we've got a deficit that we need to address over 10 years. Notwithstanding that 10 years deficit, we've got a backlog of infrastructure expenditure that still needs to be caught up at some point in time. And we already know too that we are going to have future requests for service that haven't even been identified. So that just depends on your comfort level in terms of your debt settings.
So through the mayor, and this is where it does become complex, because what Councillor Bonner is saying is also correct. So if you say that it's $50,000 a year, only $50,000 a year, then over 5 years it's $250,000. Now, if we have a problem with a road, one of these floating roads in that 5-year period, and we've spent that money servicing that loan, we've got to go and borrow that money, and we're probably borrowing at a much higher interest rate. It's trying to project those things, you know what I mean? It's not easy. For infrastructure, I like to, I'm happy to go for life with the infrastructure. In this particular case, it's a 50-50 bet each way, I reckon. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, and in no way is it a point of order, but I think Councillor Murphy's raised a point leaning towards an amendment. You've suggested he wants to change something. Just for clarity.
Well, no, what we've got at the moment
or it's your choice, is it?
Is a choice.
Right.
Yes.
We need a resolution.
So,
because we've provided that.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Because it doesn't, it's saying, do we approve it alone, and then we've got to determine over what year.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at the combined repayments on that, which is the last table over to the right, you're looking at the difference between 20 and 15 years. The 6 monthly payment, if we went 15 years, there's an extra $46,306 we'd have to find every 6 months, which is $92,612 a year, to bring it back to the total interest payment of 2218 instead of 3,073,000. I'm just asking, Roy, is that doable or is that a bridge too far?
Through you,
Very
Madam Mayor.
very much taking on board your recommendation of the 20 years.
It will impact, and this is the thing, it will impact on your future borrowing capacity. And so that's the challenge. So if you are planning on funding next year's budget, as I said, we've still got a deficit for the one that we've put out, so we need to fund that. And then depending on what happens in those other choices, that you will have eroded your borrowing capacity faster, because you've got to make more payments.
And that is the real elephant in the room, is that we don't really know what lies ahead. We've got this consultation, we've got an SRV in the table, possibly on the table, but in the day, it doesn't even matter really what the community or council wants, because it's still got to have state government approval, and we may not get half of what we need. So at that point, then you're looking at more borrowing. So you don't want to max yourself out. Again, I wish I could give you a better sliver of light, but that's really the bottom line. So we're trying to juggle a very amorphous environment. It's liquid.
Yeah.
So that's not like my road. And that's why I'm wondering about, oh no, it's literally floating under the bridge. It moves as you drive across it.
Very interesting.
So, no, it's just having deep on that floating roads. That's why I was wondering about the penalties, if we can avoid as many penalties as possible.
They're banks. At the end of the day, they're selling us now on the current market rate. The market rate's changing rapidly, and to be honest with you, and I don't want to be the voice of doom, but we are now about to enter the realm of almost hyperinflation. So the bank, even though the reserve banks are going to hold it as long as they can, the banks are already moving.
And we would lock in the rate?
Yeah, you lock in the rate. So that's not going to, the rate's not going to get any better. Let's put it in that.
Yes.
Mayor, is this then we're looking maybe a bit of both, taking the 15-year option? Is it a bit of this and a bit of that, and probably giving us a bit of the middle of the road result for what Councillor Bennett was talking about? And it sort of also backs up a little bit more on that. So it goes a bit both ways.
I think the fundamental has to be 20 years. I think that's.
Yeah, that's along the lifespan anyway. Anything, it's okay to borrow against the life of the asset. Where it becomes challenging is when it's yeah.
But this is only for what? Sorry, excuse me, through you, Ms. Mayor. This is only financing what's already been done.
Approved. Yes.
Approved. Yeah. So that doesn't account for next year or the year after, whatever. It's a 1 year thing. That scares me a little bit.
And so it's
should we, and that's, but we haven't drawn that down. I mean, we don't, it's not as though we're repaying a debt. Maybe a debt to the books, but we're not drawing this yet. If we can find further efficiencies, we may not pull this loan down 100%.
No, that loan's a full 100% loan.
But then will that give us back the services that we had only the budget we created the other day?
No, this is for this current year.
So the next 6 months.
The next budget that you set, you will have to decide how much you need to borrow to fund that or reduce the services further next year.
So, right, so the services, if we draw this out fully, we don't have to reduce services for this year. According to the budget we set.
But it's only to the end of the financial year. Yes.
I just want my potholes fixed. You know, that's the bottom line. And I think every road in the shower is expecting to have. They want their potholes fixed and their roads graded. At the end of the day, that's what we need. Whatever we're going to do, whatever capital expense, self-funded capital expense we got, I reckon we can at all. That's my personal opinion. And we need to get our road maintenance back up to par. We're well below par.
This is roads that we're talking about.
So,
yeah, so if we need to pay this.
With what you're saying, Tim, if the waste loan, the 3.3 for the cell, is over 20 years. If you look at then in the CBA over on the right, the 15-year for the road transport network, there's a difference of $20,000 per 6 months in the payment from 20 years to 15 years. How does, that was the 99 versus the 119,000. How does that, that's 40,000 a year to save us 380,000 over the term.
Over the term of loan.
For the sake of an extra 40 grand a year payments.
Fixes your problem.
No, but I mean, that brings the loan period from 20 years back to 15.
Where do you get 40 over the year? Because the repayments are 6 months, so therefore it's double that.
No. See how a 20-year repayment is at 6 months. The 20-year loan repayment 6 monthly is 99,000. The 15-year repayment 6 monthly is 119. So that's $20,000 difference per 6 months. Double that, and you've got 40,000 and $800.
Don't worry about the
$800. Yes, so $41,000 a year extra in repayments to change the loan from 20 years back to 15. You look at the column directly above the coloured stuff.
If it helps, because the numbers aren't that large, from an administration perspective, it's pretty much immaterial. Really, you guys make your call. We're happy to do whatever you want to do. I guess the only thing I'm concerned about is our borrowing capacity down the track, but I think it's, yeah, it's not a massive number, so it goes back to our capacity to pay, it's all. Yeah.
$6 from
yeah, sorry, have you got any further advice, Roy? What's your professional opinion?
Look, going through the borrowing policy that council has already adopted, it does say, and it's the conversation that Councillor Murphy was talking about, that it does say there that the council should be looking for long-term loans for capital expenditure, and the term intergenerational liability is actually mentioned in there. That yes, though we are getting the money right now to create an asset, it is the kids in the future. After 20 years, there won't be kids anymore, and they'll be and they'll be the one using that asset. So that intergenerational equity does make sense to me as a finance professional, that what we're doing right now is for a benefit to us, but also for a benefit to the young people who will then mature into the future and use those assets.
If I may say so, Madam Mayor, I don't think that argument really holds water, because that asset has been depreciated in that time. So when the children of today are enjoying it, it's not worth what it was 20 years earlier.
Yes,
and yet they're going to be the ones who are paying for it.
Yeah, but there is another component to that, which is asset maintenance and asset renewal, and any costs associated with looking at the condition of that asset, and council will be investing those funds to look at in conjunction with David Council and the asset management plan. That when you do have a project, you're looking at the whole life cycle aspect of the project, not just the acquisition, and looking at it from the short term. And there will be costings into the future, which will be set aside for a proper renewal program for that asset and maintenance program for that asset. And that will be in line with each year the IPO gets adopted.
In 20 years' time, the kids aren't paying it because the loan will have been paid off. But in 10 years' time, the kids who are then working in 10 years' time, they will be paying the current loan. So yeah, it's.
Madam Mayor, why therefore not compromise at 15 years?
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Nye.
My feeling is that right at the moment we're talking about importance of cash flow management. We're talking about a point where interest rates in the future we've got to borrow are going to be higher, no doubt. Long term would be my preference.
And again, Madam Mayor, the question that the CE asked, in terms of my professional opinion, I'm looking at council that can repay our bills for the working capital. Do we have enough money in the bank to actually sustain 6 months, 12 months? as a finance manager, yes, we got the $5 million from the NAB as a safety net, but to draw upon that is an indication that we might be looking at a liquidity crisis in the future. So as much money as we can save during the course of the action would be my preference, and the only way you get that is exactly said that if you do go for a longer term, you do have a lesser amount of cash outflow from the council happening. So
Yeah, the attractive thing about the longer
It's
term
too
at
many
these very low
unknowns,
rates
Well, but then
helps that
sorry.
way, because we don't know what's happening next year as far as rates go. So I like paying things up earlier, but given the current interest rates over that longer term, and that money, that 40,000, I'm saying if we save that over the 15 years, might be the money we might need not to pay, not to activate that NAB thing, which is 20,000 just to activate it.
Through the mayor, that's correct. And I think if you look at it in these terms, and this is a big if we go into hyperinflation, that 40,000 won't be worth 40,000, it'll be worth 20,000. So if you look at it from those terms, liquidity really is king at this particular point in time for us as a council. So I'm going to step back from what I said, that it's not material. It actually is in terms of the liquidity issue we have. So I think I'll support Roy on this. I think you guys need to consider that right now. You've got to be concentrating on liquidity, not on the future cost to the community, because it's going to be more anyway.
Madam Mayor, if you wish, I'm sorry.
Sorry, is that?
If you wish, I'm happy to move the officer, well, we've moved it forward, but you're wanting to get a time frame with this, aren't you?
Yes.
Move that we accept the officer's recommendation and over 20-year period.
Yes, is that an
Yeah, was that
amendment
or not?
required?
So what we need to do is that we need an amendment from Councillor Peter Penny to accept the quotation from the
CBA.
Oh, sorry, the first one actually, isn't it? That's Bunnabanoo.
Yep.
Bunnabanoo was still 20 years, correct, with the from the Commonwealth Bank. So that changes that, and then two approves the loan from the Commonwealth Bank for the transport infrastructure for the period of 20 years as well at the rates. Can you put that in too, please? So 20 years is 4.45. Or combined. 20 years for, let's put them separate, waste management, the one should be 4.45.
There's a combined one down the bottom.
Yeah, and then 4 point, but I'm trying to separate them out for the resolution, because even though it's combined, it's still combined 4.5.
yeah, and just on that point, Madam Mayor. So with the waste management, we are sustainable at the moment with money around 3.49 million already at external reserves. So we can certainly have further discussions. You do want to have that, and it all comes down to different philosophy. Yes, we do not want to pay for a loan and for a long time, and we can pay in a shorter amount of time, be that 10 years as well. And that's why with the Bunnabanoo project, because we are already liquid in waste management, our liquidity is not that much of a concern. We already have 3.49 million at externally restricted. We can go for the shorter amount of time, even for 10 years for that. But with the 2.6, which is the general fund, we would prefer that to be, which we've already agreed on. But
just to add on to what Roy said, that we are forecasting, this is where we come back to those caveats. That's with the caveat that we adopt the proposed increases in the future budget, and those proposed increases are still only actually set to cover your program of works over the next 4 years, which is that delivery plan cycle. So they don't go any further. Shocks, changes, new regulation. We're only looking at that short window in time, whereas the actual cell itself has got that life outside of that too. So that's the choice, I guess.
So a second for Peter's amendment, would that be you, Jeff, to go for long term? So that's the proposed amendment, is 20 years on both.
Both with the
Any
CBA.
further
should there
discussion?
be
discuss more what you just said about the 10 years on the waistline. If that would save council a reasonable amount of funds that may, if it can be paid for and it's safe to pay for.
What that will mean, just so that we're very clear, is that you will need more money in your fees and charges than what we've got in the revenue policy. So you've got to put up fees more than what you've got in there at the moment to recover those funds. Yeah.
No.
I'm just trying to be very clear,
No.
the jiggers.
Because it's clearly there on page 105 that the loan will be repaid from the waste management fund.
That's right.
That's fine. No, I'm happy to stick with what we've done. A good step. Banabanu. Banabanu. We'll get drunk one night, I'll tell you.
It's a colloquialism. It's the gonna on the whole thing. You've got to be a bit
Every right. Every right.
Any further discussion? So at the moment, it's 20 years on each with because of the to do with the interest rate, the life of the asset and the liquidity. All in favour? Against? Next one is item RC2/22. This is the Water River Organisation Council. Water Regional Council. Movement seconded, please. Do I move that?
Yes. Maybe the second amendment.
Yeah, I think Gianna beat you.
Oh, sorry. You go, John. I'll get used to that.
So,
No, I did put my pen up.
No, that's
just
good.
on-
Harry Potter pen.
So just on that meeting, obviously they expressed their gratitude to Peter for having chaired that for quite some time, and
Thanks,
the
Donna.
way in which he chaired the meeting, and they everyone was unanimous in that. In Peter's letter, he mentioned a scholarship for our local area on an annual basis. The question, they have to look at it, but they just wondered about funding it. That one, Peter, so maybe we can have more discussion on that.
I was going to
Yeah. That was fairly, they changed some of the next meeting dates around to do with heat and what have you.
Yep. You'll be happy with that, yeah. Madam Mayor, just to that, and I'll speak to the country mayors also, because I mentioned it there in the dying days of while on the executive. To do with the Rock's got over $30,000 in the bank. It's a great group, and at times, organisations, I won't say it's not needed, but they have a lot of money in the bank, not doing anything with it. To me, it just needs something to do it. My thoughts there were surely the cross that there's some small bursary or something that with the Rock Group to come up with it, and yes, coming from us, from that chairman's report that I've done, into the future, that we could come up with some bursary or something to help with UNE local, of course. I don't really know, but I mean, it just needs good discussion. I know.
So they weren't sure of like how much money you were talking about, and what sort of thing.
From the Rock come up.
So would that be similar, like New South Wales Farmers has 4 annual $5,000 sponsorships for country kids going to uni, particularly ones that are engaged in courses that go back to the bush, but it could be obviously, this would have to be less money than that. Is that the type of thing you're thinking of?
Exactly. But anyway, but to do with the minutes of that meeting and your bursary suggestion, rather than bog the meeting down, Madam Mayor, I'm happy for you and I, if you wish, to have a bit of yarn, because it says there then Tenterville Council committed to providing information for next meeting. So if you're happy with that, then we get together and we'll null it out. We can bring it to a workshop with the council, what we decided, whatever. But I just thought it was a good discussion to have for Rock, and it's definitely an opportunity there.
Thank you. Any further questions? All in favour? The next one is the traffic committee item RC3/22 on page 120. A mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bonner, Councillor Peters. I'll take it as read. Any questions?
Just quickly, Madam Mayor, on page 122, Number 4, through you, Fiona, any more, and I'm just reading that to do with the, which will be our first roundabout, and I like being positive and say it's going to happen. We any further advanced on any information there to do with that? On the Mount Lindsay?
Oh, I apologise, I'm just reading, I wasn't
No,
actually.
no, it's all good. Just says commencing a survey, prepare possible property, yeah, or if the grant is successful, just basically where it's at. That's all.
Yeah,
Or anyway.
There was some issue within the portal that we submitted on that it wasn't considered in the first round of the state funding.
Yep.
But I think it's up for the federal funding round, but we do have plenty of problems with that particular portal.
Yep.
And I think so today, so we're hoping to hear something in the next few months.
Okay. Thanks, Fiona.
With the elections coming up.
And the other one, just quickly, Madam Mayor, from your minutes of that meeting, and I was apologetic, and I do apologise. Good to see with on page 124, Shepton's Hill, Parents New England Highway. I'd love to keep, as a council, pursuing that, and yes, not our funds, grant funding. I searched with the action, it was considered by Council Parks and Gardens Committee for further investigation with no funding available. Well, if it's going to sit with Parks and Gardens, I would like to see if we can pursue something. Funding. Surely the cost is something there.
Well, particularly with the bypass.
Yeah. But it might all happen without, you know.
So the trees that went there in the first place, are they liquidators? Anyway, whatever they
Yeah.
are, was that come from Parks and Gardens?
Oh, I did wrong. It's been as long as I've been around.
Yeah.
It just wants to tidy up and a bit of love, you know. But surely the cost is something that we can do. At least we're having a go.
We're happy to explore.
But I don't understand why it says it was considered by Council Parks and Gardens because they haven't met. Or was this prior?
This would have been,
You won't
this
have
would
to
have been
spend it.
prior.
No.
Yeah, it would have been prior.
Because because the Parks and Gardens, remember they're combined now with
Yeah.
us? So I think, can we make sure that that goes as an agenda item on the,
Yeah, well, it should be on there. I would have thought it's on their minutes from their last meeting, so it should come up.
I would like to see continued pursuit of that one.
Yep.
We have wonderful approaches on our eastern northern side, and it's just that place.
and particularly with the bypass in mind,
Yeah.
we need to.
Oh.
So can we make sure that that is on the, and also can we make sure that on the next traffic committee item, we have Gianna's request about the, and I know we had the issue that our ranger was working in the office as a filling in for tourism. She's now back out, Leah's now back out ranging, so it'd be timely again to
No, that's fine, Mayor.
to just go around and mark a few times as per previously.
Have that discussion. We're just
Yeah.
waiting. We're just waiting first. We're just waiting on the new fine books. Yeah,
One stage, go, Mrs. Bear. We stop and do this for once a month or something. The Glennis Ranger would come up here and patrol Tenfield streets and vice versa.
So that would be.
Oh,
that way
bit sneaky.
Well, that way you weren't, you know.
No mates.
There was no mates.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey, 541, there's no mates with me that day down there. Dearest fine in New South Wales.
Gianna will have to warn Margot before that happens.
Good.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because I've already told her and I've told someone else, but look, you should have really, one day I had to actually go and ask them, I've got to get my dad out of the car. Can you please move? Because
we won't be mentioning names.
No,
Right.
I didn't mention names.
No, you.
Margot could be anyone.
There's quite a few of them, I think.
Got some gravel there.
So come back to our admonishments at the start of the council meeting, no mentioning of names. Councillor.
I just think that other councils have done that as well that I've heard of. It's just, you know, just, well, it does the job and it then upsets your relatives or your mates, so.
We'll
We've got any.
we'll take that on board, councillor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions with Joseph? Yes.
Sorry, I noticed going through all the papers we were given, I can't remember in which one I saw it, that we have allowed for subdivisions, a few
Hang on.
subdivisions.
Is that with the
No, it's connected to this, just let me finish. In Ruse Road. Ross Road, well, okay then. So in Ross Road, they've got serious road conditions.
No, just on that. Down
Isn't
Winter
that
Drive,
traffic?
Don't went for a drive and he said the road's.
I've been out to that road. I did send you an email because I thought it must have been on the wrong road. It's in pristine condition.
I'll show you photos later.
But how old are those photos?
He took them the other day.
They must have been on the wrong road because the road's in pristine.
I've been down there too, I'm sorry.
It's one of the best roads. I was doing 80, 100 Ks until I got to the driveway at the end.
We'll handle those.
Sorry, we've got to go
regulations
through
to deal with it.
So we can, that's a separate. We'll work out exactly that we are on the right bit of road,
Yeah.
just double check that one, so.
Bring up another point on
Yes.
this report, please. I got contacted by a lady, I presume someone would know who this was, about the Shipman Hills appearance. And the, obviously the, yes, wasn't going to mention that.
Sorry, councillor, was that Shipman's Hill?
Shipman's Hill, yeah, that's
No, I was just qualifying what you said there.
What's your Germany, is it?
Order.
The approach to our town is signs falling down and it's not very pleasant. Look, it has been noted that there's no funding available at this point in time, but I still think it needs to be on council's mind when it comes to these sort of things.
You're the cleaning up.
Opportunities to even pull down these signs or just something or tidy them up.
Well, just to clarify, the sign that fell down had only fallen down 4 days prior to that letter. Because when I drove south, I saw the sign and I rang the owner and said, "Are you with your signs? What happened to your sign?" And that's, it happened in that bad Wednesday night storm that went through.
But it's not the only sign though, is
No,
it?
and so that's the only one that's falling down. Now, that's not on council land, that's private land. Now, the ones on council land in Bendals, Neville went through and checked them. And the ones that were not stable, he had them removed by the owners. One of them was the Sexton and Green sign, and Graham Rossington got Wayne Griffiths out to remove it as per the council request. So now 4 of those signs, I think maybe 5, have now been lettered, which will be additional income for council. And I believe the private person whose sign's fallen over is going to remove it. So, but that's it. But that comes back to what Peter was talking about. Also, it's getting some more trees there and a bit of love there. Particularly, as Peter said, we've got a lovely entrance to the north of these, despite some of our trees falling over due to drainage. And we need to make sure that the south is up to par. So my question was to the owner regarding Drake. How are we going with the Drake funding for all the work that happened down there? I know you're going to very keen to have some community consultation.
We're still trying to get through the executing the deed. Only the last couple of days, so we expect that might happen, but we're not actually allowed to start any works prior to the 1st of April.
Right.
Good. No, so it's probably likely to be after Easter and Anzac Day that we actually get down there and start the community consult.
Oh, I know the bloke who owns the property that owns that sign out there. I've spoken to Nick Pickett from the Liberty Service Station.
Yes, so you spoke to the owner.
If they want to re-erect the sign, it's up to them. If they don't want to get the steel and make a few more gates or something like that, it will be gone one way or the other very shortly. I talked to the owner, he agrees.
Through the mayor, we don't need to write to the owner a stern letter or anything like that.
No, I would.
Thank you.
To give it to him today.
All in favour with the traffic committee. Page 128, item RC4/22. This is the country mayor's meeting in Sydney now. But I just wanted to make note to everyone that the IFS assets. Oh, I need to move in a second. Sorry, I even have them up here.
Well, you're going to move that one, Madam Mayor.
So if you turn to page 137, these are the main things. Page 136, the biodiversity offset scheme. This is where the country mayors are very concerned, as we all are, for those of us in the know, just how much the biodiversity offset scheme is actually impacting on any infrastructure, etc. So, for instance, you might remember the Deputy Premier at the time, John Barilaro, talking about dams and the Warragamba Dam, $600 million to do the work. but there was an extra $400 million to do the biodiversity offsets, etc., which would have paid for another dam or another infrastructure somewhere else. And that's what they said, it's just crippling the ability of rural and regional New South Wales to actually get ahead with doing things because of this extremely high impost through a biodiversity offset scheme that is worked out on all sorts of models and things. This next one, treatment of RFS assets.
So what was happening with that?
Well, they've written they're writing to the state government to say, and the Minister of the Environment to say, you know, we need to fix this because the way it's currently operating is not sustainable in the rural areas. It's just impinging too much on the financial burdens of rural councils to do anything because it's basically a 2/5 of everything, or the cost of everything you do is in that. So it's stopping. It's a massive cost. So in other words, if you want to do something in your paddock, so you've got to clear some trees to put a road in or to put a dam or to put a bridge in, you have to pay an offset elsewhere to equal it. And it can get extremely exorbitant. RFS assets, they're writing to the New South Wales Office of Local Government to request the legal, they're of the understanding that the Office of Local Government have got a legal opinion in relation to the accounting treatment of the RFS assets by New South Wales Council, and they believe it supports our position that we don't own them, we don't control them, we don't control their purchasing, therefore we should not be in charge of the depreciation. So they've requested that report to be released, that's that one. Sam Faraway, the Minister for Regional Transport, he spoke at length and he made the comment that he's getting Transport more involved in some of the assessments of disaster stuff, not just resilience. He had concerns that some of the previous assessments were taking too long and not accounting the impact of a previous thing prior to the most recent one. For instance, he said some councils were still awaiting assessment of stuff that happened in March 2020. So then when they had the March 2021 impact event, when the assessors were looking, they said, oh, well, the change in condition is not that much different from the March 21. And the council is saying, no, hang on, we want you to assess it from what it was before March 20, because we're still waiting on the March 20 thing. So he was talking about that. The Armidale Mayor hopped up and asked about what were they doing about the rail line from Deepwater to Wollongara, because they've got obviously funding for rail trails to go from Black Mountain to Glen Innes, and he called it the dead end of Wollongara. This is Sam from Armidale Council, and I said, well, I look forward to the support of Armidale Council in us getting our roads handed back to the state government so that we might have some funding to maintain any rail trails. So this, and as the Minister said, he's seen good rail trails and he's seen bad rail trails not working so well. The smart cities or smart places gentleman did a presentation which had, it was called sort of smart cities, but there was some aspects of that in time I think would work well in country towns. Things to do with I don't know, Peter's talked about, you know, e-bike charging, about us having lights that work off solar that come on at certain times, and all sorts of other, there was a whole interesting presentation there, which if you can get a copy of, I think everyone would find quite interesting. And then finally the health forum, they're writing to the Minister for Health requesting that a health forum be conducted after the upper house inquiry be held in a rural area.
Madam Mayor, well done. Just a comment, if I may, with 15, good to see, because I've been on about all the time because it wasn't election promise, that there's still, that's road classification, and obviously with our application for books. And Lindsay and while Fiona's here, no more you did mention one that we had to apply again or second round or something.
Oh, they never fully assessed the first priority round, so
Right.
everybody had to go in for the final round, but only closed on the 28th of February,
Yeah.
and it's likely to take another 6 to 8 months.
Yes, sorry, I didn't like to speak to that. That very day, he was meeting with Wendy Machen, who's the chair of the independent panel that will be looking at these. And he said it's not going to happen overnight. He will expect a report in July. And sort of that action, towards the end of the year. But from what he said, I was taking it that it wouldn't be the full 15,000, which is a real concern.
Yeah.
So I've suggested to our chief executive that we write a joint letter from us, Inverell, Wider and Maureen, to the minister as a joint council thing to say, please take back this Grubston away and put it front of mind to him because, yeah.
Well, I just always thought, Madam Mayor, that four councils added some strength to it.
Absolutely.
Good alliance.
That's what I was thinking too.
Cheers. Sorry.
You'd include Coyote.
Good.
Oh, yeah, but get that one going there.
Runs all directions.
And we can do a joint one with the other.
Madam Mayor, if I just, and I will be quick, and I'm happy to go with you as the member, council representative and country mayors. I did raise it with the executive at the end of last year, same thing with the scholarship. Country mayors is over $100,000 sitting there, from membership. And the only cost we have is to pay our bit of secretary work when they book the bloody room at Parliament House for a cup of tea, whatever. So I'm happy for you and me to work with something there. So Tenterfield, when your next meeting is, to take a motion back to this to get that role, because they're all very happy with that. Nothing, once again, a bit rounded, nothing to say, well, what's it actually going to do? But some sort of scholarship through country mayors also. Something. Bursary, I don't care.
Now we've got Tim, then we've got Councillor Tom, and then Councillor Jack. Good. Okay, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. Evidently, it came up the rail trail between Deepwater and Jennings or Wangara. What are they going to do about all the bridges and crossings? You can't possibly use the bridges because they're all wrecked, and half the crossings are pulled out. So what do you do?
Well, that's exactly right. However, I did see David Mills, who's from the New England Rail Trail people over at the Gravel and Granite, and so I said to him, obviously we know it would be tourists, but the issue is the maintenance of it falls on councils. And so do you have ratepayers paying to fix rail trails when they're not fixing Tim Bonner's potholes? And that is the issue. He said, oh, there's ways that money can be raised to do maintenance, and I believe down there they're looking at some sort of memorandum of understanding. So we're happy to have further conversations. I also pointed out that we had a very strong railway station museum, etc. here, and have always wanted to continue to run trikes down to Bluff Rock, etc., and or other whatever. And apparently there's ways that they can come around this, like run a rail trail adjacent to the actual tracks. And they love our, as you said, our railway stations, second to none, which I have to agree with. As does our chief executive. Yeah, so those very issues. What do you do when there is no bridge? And if there's no bridge and it's on private land, there's no longer, is that corridor still actually there or not? So, but open to discussion. And our other issue, of course, is, which we're still waiting on, is the RMS with the train station, is will they extend their Douglas Street overpass over the actual rail line so that our rail station is not marooned in the centre of the bypass.
Thank you.
And we did have Councillor Jeffries disappear.
I don't think it'll be a go. Too much money involved trying to fix all the bridges. You can't just go across the river when it's flooded. It's very difficult. Bush bikes don't work very well, and you can't walk across the river when it's in flood.
Sure, Jesus.
At the moment, you wouldn't cross it.
You didn't speak about the crocodiles either.
They make that bad there.
Yeah, terrible.
So we'll move to the, so anyway, all in favour? And if Councillor Nye's got a question, we'll just take it out of sync there. Page 138, item NM1/22, notice of rescission motion in relation to the Rotary and the Oracles of the Bush use of council equipment and I need to move and second it. Councillor Kim. Councillor Kim Rhodes moved, seconded Councillor Tim.
Well, I suppose this came up, we had a very succinct discussion about it in council. The following day, I received a call from a member of the community pointing out to me the longevity of both organisations in the community and the benefits that they bring to our shire. And at that time, after being pointed out a number of facts, I talked to a couple of other councillors, and that's the purpose of my rescind motion is based on the fact that these two organisations have been in our community, bringing people to our shire and doing work within our shire for such a long period of time. And I just believe that we need to afford them the ability to run these two events over the next 2 weeks as easily as they possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Tim.
I can only support that Kim's rescission motion on the basis that these two organisations are amazing and they bring so much to the shire, and I just feel it's 100% the right thing to do, as noted by Kim. That's all. Thank you.
Right, and so just to be clear, it would be no cost for the equipment, but there would still be a bond and it would still be the council officers administration charge. Correct. If we can just on page 139 in part 2, as per cost, just make it per PER. Any comment? Questions? Why not put the motion all in favour? Carried. Item this one, page 143, item RES 3/22, council resolution register. A mover and seconder, please. Councillor Secon and seconder Councillor McNish. Any questions on this? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. We now
Yeah, happy to move that way that we're going.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Petty, a seconder. Councillor Tim, Connor, seconder. Well, I thought he put his hand on the way.
We did, that's what we did.
Right. He's moving, so. So now I can read this.
Yes.
Okay. So in relation to item ENB 6/22 steel recycling contract, council has determined to accept the officer's recommendation. The council accept the tender of Infrabil for the steel recycling contract. Thank you. That brings the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance and your perseverance and your input, and to our staff. And we travel safely. We'll now stay for lunch, but prior to that, just have a presentation to one of our staff.
Just turn that off.
Thank you very much.
Does this get us? Yes.